Infrastructure Committee. Declare the meeting open to the public. Any takers? Could I just at this point advise anyone in the public gallery that they can use mobile devices through Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. 3G, 4G should not be used. No recordings or photographs are to be taken. Okay, in terms of today's business, we have to deal with 22 statutory rules, a briefing from the Northern Ireland Water, departmental briefing on Transport and the Resources Group, excuse me, briefing from Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company. Have we any apologies? I have one from Mr. Robinson, who's ill. Any others? No, good. In terms of chairperson's business, can I advise that we're obviously going into summer recess. This is our last meeting before the recess. And normal practice, I understand, is that the committee delegates authority to the chairperson and deputy chairperson to deal with freedom of information requests received during the recess period. It will be for the chairperson and deputy chairperson to submit views on releasing withholding information, non-routine or contentious FOI requests. If there are any such requests, the committee will be advised at the first meeting back in September. Is everyone happy with that?
We're very confident in you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate that. It's me doomed. Draft minutes are at page 7. I take it members have all read and agreed them. Okay. Matters arising. Have we any matters arising from those minutes? Okay. As I've said earlier, members, there are 22 proposals for statutory rules in the meeting packet, page 15. 6 of these proposals are subject to Assembly procedure, so I intend to outline what these 6 proposals are and ask members if they are content for the statutory rules to come forward. Okay. Point 5, SL1, Donaghadee Harbour area, is at page 15. This rule will fix the area within which the powers of Ards and North Down Borough Council as the local harbour authority and its officers may be exercised and where dues may be charged. This rule is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly. Are members content with the proposals of this statutory rule?
Agreed.
Point 6, SL1, Fort William Parade, Belfast, at page 24. This rule will abandon 306.2 square metres of alleyway to the rear of Fort William Parade, Belfast. On the coming into operation of the rule, the area of road in question shall cease to be maintainable by the Department. This rule is subject to negative resolution by procedure before the Assembly, and as proposed it will come into operation later this year. Are members content with this statutory rule? Are we?
Yep.
SL1.7, the Ran Road, Annacloy Road, down Patrick, at page 27. The rule will abandon an area of 91 square metres of road at the Ran Road, Annacloy Road junction, Downpatrick. On the coming into operation of the rule, the area of the road in question shall cease to be maintainable by the Department. The Department is of the opinion that the road is no longer necessary for road traffic. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly, and it is proposed it will come into operation later this year. Members content?
Agreed.
Okay. Gilpinstown Road, Lurgan, at page 30. The rule will abandon the length of 110 metres of road at Gilpinstown Road, Lurgan. On the coming into operation of the rule, the length of the road in question shall cease to be maintainable by the Department. The Department considers that the road is no longer necessary for road traffic. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly, and it is proposed that it will come into operation later this year. Members content?
Content.
Okay. the Railways Safety Safety Management Amendment Regulations at page 33. The rule will amend an earlier set of regulations, the Railways Safety Management Regulations Northern Ireland 2006. The 2006 regulations implemented the requirements of the European Commission Directive regarding the rail safety in Northern Ireland. This directive required all member states to collect information on a number of common safety indicators based on the common definitions and calculation methods. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly and is proposed it will come into operation later this year. Members content?
Yep.
Amendments to the motor vehicles wearing of seatbelts regulations at page 37. This rule will amend the Regulation 6 brackets 1 of the motor vehicles wearing of seatbelts regulations 1993 by inserting a qualified exemption from the requirement to wear a seatbelt for certain persons riding in a motor ambulance. The exemption applies where the person is providing medical attention or treatment which, due to its nature or medical situation of the patient, cannot be delayed. It is not anticipated that the exemption would extend to the driver of the ambulance. The statutory rule is subject to affirmative resolution procedure before the Assembly, and as such there will be provision for an Assembly debate. Given the affirmative nature of the proposed statutory rule, members may wish to receive an oral briefing from Department officials when the SR is led. Are members content? Okay. Okay, the others then, 11.11, the other 16 proposals are not subject to Assembly procedure and refer to temporary road closures for work schemes, etc. I will therefore ask you to refer to the information of these in your pack and ask members if they're content with them. Members content? Okay, thank you very much.
Is that number Ballyclare? Ballyclare's one-way system?
Out.
Yeah, good speech.
Okay, we now have a briefing from Northern Ireland Water.
Listen to your chair.
Okay, so
Good morning.
good morning. Welcome Sarah Venning, Chief Executive, Mr Ronan Larkin, Director of Finance and Regulation, and Mr Sean McAleese, Director of Customer Services. You're very welcome to the committee, folks, and I presume you're going to make a presentation and then members will have questions, I'm sure. You're happy to field those, yes?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for inviting us to speak to you this morning. We're very pleased to be here to start the conversation with you on the role of NI Water and our impact on the citizens of Northern Ireland. So I suppose, thank you for the introductions. I'm the Chief Executive of Northern Ireland Water. Sean is our Director of Customer Services Delivery, and he looks after water and wastewater services and our customer interfaces. And Ronan is our Director of Finance and Regulation. I suppose you coming here this morning recognising your role very much as a scrutiny and an oversight committee, we thought it might be helpful to spend a short amount of time introducing our organisation, our plans for NI Water, looking out as far as 2021, and then sharing with you where we see our value add in the areas of health, the environment and economic development. So before we look forward, if I could just take a few minutes to reflect on our journey to date. And I think it would be fair to say that the investment that has been made in water and wastewater in Northern Ireland could only be described as a success story for our region. Since 2007, £1.7 billion has been invested, and this has directly supported delivering best ever water quality in recent years in both drinking water and our wastewater compliance. So that investment in Northern Ireland's water and wastewater infrastructure has helped us to deliver clean, safe drinking water to every citizen, to every school, to hospitals every day, and supports us in contributing to and protecting Northern Ireland's environment and natural landscapes with cleaner beaches, cleaner rivers and improved stewardship of the landmass that we own and operate. We as a business have a very strong customer focus and we are very proud to be able to say that we have doubled our customer satisfaction scores at a rate that is twice as fast as some of the companies with whom we're compared. And really, we've done all that while improving our operating efficiency, the cost to run the business. So, in essence, we firmly believe that we are delivering more for less. Our customers are seeing an improved service at a lower cost. But we're not finished, and we certainly have an ambition for more. And the little slide that you should have in your packs with the circle sets out our vision and our strategy for the next 5 years. I suppose, fundamentally, we provide water and sewage services on a 24/7 basis, and you know, this glass of water, thank you very much for the water this morning,
There's no charge.
is what we're really about. We want to be every day to every home right across Northern Ireland. There is a cost. While there's no charge, there's certainly a cost. And the department, through their subsidy, for just little over £1 a day, that's sufficient for us to provide an unlimited supply of water to every home and business in Northern Ireland, and to take away their waste. So no charge, but certainly a cost. We want to be a valued and trusted provider, an organisation that customers and staff are proud of. And as you will come to understand through your interactions with us, we're very much an asset-intensive business. Actually, to replace all our assets brand new, like for like, could cost up to £9 billion. So it just gives you a bit of a sense of the scale of our organisation. And in order to provide customers today and the customers of tomorrow with the levels of service that they require, we must therefore plan our investment many years in advance. So our strategy for the next 5 years is built around delivering 8 customer promises that you can see on the slide. But it's a long-term strategy which looks out even further, right out to 2040, and the things we might want to do. And Sean and Ronan will pick up on how, in more detail, how these promises link to the areas of health, the environment and the economy. So how do we go about developing a strategy for Northern Ireland Water? Well, we start with the citizens of Northern Ireland, our own customers, and we ask them what they want from our services. And then we look to the priorities of government and what they can afford, what they feel they can afford. And we work then with the environmental regulators to understand their priorities within that finite funding window. And we use those inputs to develop a business plan. That business plan is then scrutinised by the utility regulator, who challenges us to make sure we are as efficient as we can possibly be, and compares us with other comparable businesses across the UK. So they opine on our business case, and they challenge us on efficiency, and that becomes what's known as a final determination. And that final determination details the outputs that we as a company contract to deliver, if you like, and the funding then that the regulator believes an efficient company would need to deliver those outputs. And from that point on, it's really up for our shareholder to fund that plan, and it's up to us as a company to deliver that plan. Taking you on just to the next slide in the pack. So we feel and see very clearly that our services are fundamental to safeguarding health, to protecting the environment and to promoting a strong regional economy. So if you think about health, clean, safe drinking water every day for everyone, and world-class drainage and sanitation systems, that's what we're about. Fundamentally, if you don't have our services and if they're not in place, people get sick, people get ill. The biggest shift and change in public health in modern society wasn't brought about by high-tech medical research, but it was actually the provision of sanitation in the form of sewers. So just taking it back to basics. And in terms of protecting the environment, Northern Ireland Water has a landmass of some 23,000 acres. We discharge into the sea, rivers and lochs at 2,500 locations. So we have a significant role in protecting the environment. And not to mention our carbon footprint. So we consume 290 gigawatt hours of power, which is about the equivalent of about 64,500 domestic homes. So there's a really strong linkage between our environmental stewardship and health. I suppose if you think about the Blue Flag Beach Awards that were awarded recently, if we fail to be in a position to treat waste and discharge inappropriately, that has an impact on the health of those using those facilities. We also work in partnership with voluntary organisations to deliver a range of great environmental outcomes, all aimed at improving the catchments through which our raw water is obtained. So we're tree planting around the Faughan Valley with the Woodland Trust. We're working in the Mournes with the Mourne Heritage Trust, and we're working in the Garran Plateau with the RSPB, so quite a strong environmental credential for the company. And then finally, supporting a strong regional economy for Northern Ireland. We need, and the people of Northern Ireland need, infrastructure to be ready to take growth as the growth arises, not 10 or 20 years after the growth has occurred. So that means that we're in a position to connect homes, factories, hotels and offices to a modern infrastructure as they are developed. It means having an infrastructure in place that is able to provide services to the additional visitors numbers coming to the province in Belfast and right across Northern Ireland. So I'm going to hand you over to Sean, who's going to just take you into a little bit more detail about the company.
Okay, as Sarah mentioned, we are an asset-intensive organisation, and just to give you a little bit of feel for what I mean by that, every day we supply 560 million litres of water to homes and businesses across Northern Ireland. And we do that through collecting the water at impounding reservoirs, treating it at 24 water treatment works across Northern Ireland, and through a network of nearly 27,000 kilometres of water main, we supply that water to homes and businesses. And in terms of collecting and treating wastewater, we collect 330 million litres per day through a series of nearly 16,000 kilometres of sewers and over 1,000 wastewater treatment works. So a huge infrastructure. We have a presence right across Northern Ireland. We touch every part of Northern Ireland in terms of our asset base. Picking up on some of the strategic themes that Sarah has mentioned, in the first one really safeguarding the environment, and linking that through to our strategy and customer promises. And our customer promises linked to that are about taking care of the wastewater and not polluting the environment, protecting and enhancing the natural environment, and dealing with the impact and effects of climate change. And we do that by outperforming our wastewater targets and reducing the number of pollution incidents. We have new record low levels of pollution incidents last year. We want to support the natural environment, and an example of that would be where we use sustainable solutions, environmental friendly sustainable solutions through integrated constructed wetlands, which is a natural way of treating wastewater. It's high performance effluent, it's low energy and it's low maintenance. We're also very conscious of our carbon footprint, and we have a programme of work to reduce our energy consumption. We are one of the largest energy consumers in Northern Ireland. Our power bill is in the region of £28 million per year. We are the largest, as I say, and nearly 40% of our power comes from renewable resources. The second theme to touch on is protecting people's health, and the customer promises related to that are taking care of the wastewater, providing safe, clean drinking water, and providing you with the amount of water that you actually need to. And we do that by optimising the management of our wastewater treatment works. And at the minute, 98% of our customers are served by compliant works. In other words, we meet the stringent standards met by the Environment Agency in terms of the treatment and disposal of our wastewater. We want customers to have confidence in our quality of our water. And our overall compliance is 99.79%, and that's independently regulated by the Drinking Water Inspectorate. So a very rigorous protocol and testing programme in terms of our water quality, and that's regulated by the Drinking Water Inspectorate. And then we want to provide you with the water you need in terms of meeting the demand, reducing the supply interruptions, reducing leakage, and removing customers from the risk of low pressure. And last year, we had a programme where we actually reduced or take 171 properties off our low pressure register. So a programme of work to try and address the low pressure across Northern Ireland. I'm going to hand you over to Ronan.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Just picking up again the continued theme around the strong regional economy. So what our role in the economy here in Northern Ireland. So thinking about, we provide you with the water you need, and our role is to ensure that supply of services in place to facilitate that growth. Maybe just to ground that a little bit in some context, last year we connected 6,000 new properties to our water network, and we also connected 4,000 properties as well, 4,000 properties to the wastewater network. So again, that's last year. That will continue every year, and as our economy grows, that number will grow as well. What we do is delivered through assets, but it's delivered by people. So we have 1,300 people in the business, and thinking about then, we provide you with customer service you value and expect every time we interact with customers or go out to do some work out in the field. Our role as well is to equip all the staff at Northern Ireland Water with the right kind of technology, new modern technology to run a new modern infrastructure, the right equipment to do their job, the tool to do the job, and also then to continually train them and improve the skills base at Northern Ireland Water with their workforce. Continuing to invest in our water distribution mains to improve water quality. So that all gets delivered to our mains network. And last year, as part of the investment programme, we upgraded and replaced 117 kilometres of water main across the places in the province. And then around delivering the service which our customers consider to be affordable and offer excellent value for money. Like for like, over the last 4 or 5 years, our bill to customers who pay, so the businesses and so on who pay the bills currently as well, we have reduced the cost of those on a like-for-like basis by 12.5%. So we're continued driving efficiency through the business, running the business in a more effective way, and that has a positive impact then on those bills out to customers. Again, if you just move to the next slide, then we just put some pictures on there just to take a look at what we do. So top left-hand corner, graphic of new housing development. We've talked about that. And again, if you go around any part of Northern Ireland, you'll see the economy starting to move again. Some of the housing, some of the social housing needs starting to be addressed and so on by Stormont here. And our role in making sure that those houses can connect through to those essential services. On the top right-hand side, some of the insignia there, you'll recognise maybe some of the names around the province. So from a manufacturing perspective and from an exporting perspective, Invista and Norbrook would be two of the big customers there. From a food processing perspective, a big part of our economy here. Moy Park has a big presence in Northern Ireland, and again, we would supply service into that. And then again, thinking about the agri sector here, again, an important part of our economy. Dale Farm there, processing from the agri side again. Just one of the examples there of customers. And of course, around the health piece, we put an example of the Western Health and Social Care Trust, but right across the province then, the services going into the schools and hospitals and so on across the piece. On the bottom left-hand corner, we work with a very wide supply base in Northern Ireland, from everything from consumables and stationery and things we need to run the business every day, through to some of the big constructions programmes. And we've listed out a few of the people there. Our power, Sean talked about our £28 million use of power. That's provided by GoPower currently under a contract we have with them. We work widely with the Construction Employers Federation and again some of these bigger engineering firms to build the capital schemes out. We've talked on the way through, just move to the next slide then, about the scale of the capital investment and some of the constraints that we have to be realistic about and that Northern Ireland faces there. So we call this the funding challenge. Our current business plan, Price Control 15, takes us out for a 6-year period out to 2021. And that plan was something we presented to government, and we presented the plan to the utility regulator for them to determine on it. The utility regulator broadly endorsed our plan. They pushed a little bit further for us as well. They give us some stretch in there. And our role there, and the little symbols there in the middle of that slide, sums up what we have to do to continue to do this next 6-year plan. So we have to continue to find a way of improving our cost base and lowering the costs of providing the service, and that again means continued lower bills out to businesses who are paying that at the moment in organisations. That ties in with our improved efficiency. So already today, Northern Ireland Water is like for like. It's costing us £65 million a year less to run it today than it did back in 2008-09. So we've taken a lot of cost out of the base already, but we have a plan to continue to improve that cost efficiency and to take more cost out and improve the service while we do it. We have a large and significant investment programme to make in the water and the sewage services. So each year we would ideally receive about £155 million from government if it was available to meet the plan. And then our role is to get that plan out and get those assets into the ground and get things built and working. And all of that then allows us to continue to meet the new targets to improve the service level to customers continually through the 6-year plan. So where does that come to in terms of funding? And this takes into the world of constraints and so on. So Northern Ireland could, if it was available, invest £2.8 billion in water and wastewater assets. Northern Ireland would need that investment, and Northern Ireland Water might be tasked to deliver it. But we couldn't absorb all that in a 6-year plan. What we think we could have absorbed was 1.7 billion to build out those assets. Now, what's available through the programme for government currently, and what's available in the coffers, as it were, for Northern Ireland, was it was agreed that there would be a constrained amount of funding up to £990 million across the 6-year plan, and that was set and agreed by the regulator and the government. So our role is to build that piece, but already we're in our 2nd year of the price control plan now, the 6-year plan, and already that 990 is under some pressure, as was the Stormont's money is under pressure as well. So we see some of that investment being constrained further, probably up to about 10% at this point through the piece. If you bear in mind, we talked about the £9 billion replacement value of the asset base. Half of that money is used to maintain the current asset base's serviceabilities. In the same way as any of us would maintain our motor car or our home, we have to maintain the asset base and make sure it does just what it was designed to do when it went into the ground. So half of that 990 is used to maintain it. So that means that the other half is available to build out any new assets that Northern Ireland needs across the province to take these services further out to people, whether it's in the city here in Belfast or up in the northwest, whether it's out in rural areas, improving the infrastructure out to rural areas and making sure that connectivity is available. The number's constrained. Our challenge is to get the most out of that. But I think one of the challenges we face collectively is how do we fund and how do we make that money available for that essential service. If you then to turn to the next slide, and again we've just used some graphics here to think about this. So why is it important to make sure the funding is in place? And we've tried to contrast sort of, what would happen under sufficient funding and what would happen when the funding starts to become further constrained. Now, I'm glad to say that the levels of service and the quality and the environmental standards we supply today and we comply with today are strong, and we've grown those steadily over the last 9 years, with the support of government here and Stormont here, making sure the money is available for that. So under sufficient funding, we get best ever drinking water quality, getting towards being on a par with England and Wales and Scotland, and we think citizens in Northern Ireland deserve that. We get the investment programme, so we get the huge infrastructure programme, which ordinarily you tend to notice it when it's being built because we might have to rip up a road. But when it's all done and dusted, it all goes away and the road is put back in place and it becomes an invisible piece of infrastructure, but it's there nonetheless. That has an impact on our environment, as we talked about positive. So it's graphic there of a clean beach for all of us to enjoy, for tourists to come and enjoy here as well in Northern Ireland. And then just one of our works, a modern, efficient plant delivering 21st century services to customers. When the funding starts to become constrained, but you then have a potential, you start building the risk towards a regression of those service levels and those quality levels and those standards of compliance. So you may start to get some impact on the quality of water and how that water is perceived by customers. We may get a higher burst rate on our water mains, so you get a more frequent interruption to supply. Our discharges may not be as good as they could be, or you start cutting back on some of the treatment standards, so you may have an impact on what we discharge out into waterways and the environment. And again, on the growth piece, if we don't have infrastructure in place to meet the demands, whether it's growing housing needs or growing industry or growing commercial base, then we start to become a constraint on the economy, because really the infrastructure has to be in place before that growth can be taken on and met. And that's probably it's a graphical representation of sufficient funding to maintain and grow the service for customers today and customers tomorrow, and the possible impacts that we would have to start thinking about how we address collectively when the funding isn't available.
So thank you, Sean and Ronan. I thought we'd end up with some couple of photographs. I've worked for Northern Ireland Water for just over 6 years, and when I get out and about in our sites, and as I know you will, whether that's a water treatment works or a wastewater treatment works or somewhere like the Silent Valley where we capture our raw water, I never fail to be impressed by the absolutely inspirational nature of what it is that we do. We are truly a public service organisation, and when you meet our people demonstrate that ethos time and time again. As Ronan has spoken to, there is undoubtedly a funding conundrum for our politicians here, and I think a need for us collectively to ask of ourselves, what is our level of ambition? What do we want for Northern Ireland? The photograph on the top left of that final slide shows a water main construction back in the 1890s. when the Water Commissioners, with a very clear vision and an ambition for clean, safe, plentiful drinking water for a growing population, set about investing in infrastructure that served generations, that left a legacy. The picture on the bottom right shows maybe how we've picked up on that ambition to ensure that we have 21st century infrastructure capable of delivering for customers today and customers tomorrow. So that photograph showing the Belfast Tunnel that was built to alleviate the risk of flooding. Our company ambition in NI Water is clear, but to realise it, we need access to funding. Ronan has shared some of the potential implications of not funding NI Water, and I suppose I would say that if we fail to invest, are we investing in failure? For certain, if failures occur, they cannot be rectified quickly, that we are a long-term business and we need to, our solutions to problems take a long time to fix. So would we be leaving a lasting legacy of pollution and of economic stagnation? And I feel confident that collectively we want much more and much better than that for Northern Ireland. And I know that with the Executive's backing, the team in NI Water can deliver upon our commitments in protecting health, in safeguarding the environment and in promoting a strong regional economy. So happy to take questions.
Can I ask you, in terms of fractures and leakages and so on, in terms of drinking water, does the funding that you have outlined for us allow you to get on top of that? Are you getting on top of that?
So our performance in relation to leakage is very good at the minute, and the plan, so really I suppose what we're talking about, the plan that we agreed with the regulator, which we will keep calling the final determination, which asked for £990 million worth of funding, that plan allowed us to keep on top of and actually to deliver what's known as the sustainable economic level of leakage, and actually to maybe even outperform that sustainable economic level of leakage. So yes, within the 6-year plan that we derived and that the utility regulator has endorsed, there would be sufficient funding. I guess at year 2 of being 10% underfunded, if that's not caught up within the 6-year window, then that's when you potentially do start to see, when we talk about regression in service, it could be that your leakage level would increase, or the number of times that people experience a supply interruption due to a burst would increase. But with the funding plan that we had in place at £990 million, we certainly had plans to deliver a sustainable economic level of leakage.
Do I take it that the infrastructure that you inherited, the network and so on, there's a huge amount of money to be spent and needing to be spent because of, I presume, for example, during the Troubles, there was perhaps not as much money spent in that sort of investment and maintenance and development because of, obviously, security pressures. So are we, in a sense, and it just doesn't apply to the area we're talking about now, we're playing catch-up because of that investment wasn't there?
There is a legacy.
Yeah.
Certainly, we took the asset base on in 2007 as an organisation. So there was Water Service before, it's a good organisation, and then we took that organisation forward in Northern Ireland Water. And there was a legacy of underinvestment then, and we have through the years been catching up with some of that underinvestment. So the drinking water quality standards we've reached in the last number of years, the improved environmental standards that we're operating to, are the outputs of that part of that legacy catch-up. But there probably are still elements that we still need to catch up. We're not to the same level as the organisations that we're benchmarked with in England, Wales and possibly Scotland. And there's more work to grow, to build more assets in terms of modern infrastructure that will allow us to improve those standards and improve the efficiency.
That's presumably because their investment was at a higher level and more constant, where it wasn't here.
It was, yes, and they probably didn't face that the constraint that a government would face as well.
Can I ask you then, in terms of you've outlined the amount of money you get in terms of the grant aid or whatever from government. Is there a level figure for service that you sell in terms of income, for example, to the private sector? What's that?
Yeah, we bill, in terms of what we bill to businesses and organisations, non-domestics, we bill approximately £67 million a year. So that's part of our funding. We have to get that in first. We have to get that billed, get it collected, and use that then to as part of our funding model.
67 million.
67 million.
Okay. And just before I bring other members in, can I just say to you, I mean, I know there has been tremendous work done on beaches. Not that in my constituency we have any beaches, but in terms of what we're talking about anyway. Can I commend the work that's been done there, because I know there are lots of blue flags now that weren't there before.
Yes.
And I think that's something which is hugely important, you know, in terms of providing a joined-up governance to allow, you know, tourism to go out and sell in Northern
That's right.
Ireland, and these are so well done there. Mrs. Palmer.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Sarah and Sean and Ronan for the presentation. I want also to congratulate you, as the Chairman has done, in terms of the wetland at Stonyford. It was an excellent project, and I just wonder, is there any plans within your forward planning going that something can be created in other areas of Northern Ireland, where I know it's small scale,
Yes.
but if
yeah,
there is an opportunity there to deliver that as opposed to concrete mass
very much
in
so.
terms of our environment. And I want to touch on the quality of your water, and 99.79% is a fantastic result. But a lot of people out there don't trust that, and the reason for it is that your testing on water is planned, and that in its own right does not include any of the complaints that have been proven to have had major issues. And we just wondered why that can't be part of the overall report in terms of, and whether that reduces it or not. The fact that it's being ignored, that when there are complaints out there from your consumer and they're proven, and you have to flush the systems and you have to, you know, do the repairs, that's actually not part of your overall testing. And and so a lot of confidence out there in the trust of the 99.79%, and I think they just want trust. So if that's a possibility within the regulation of your water quality, then I think you should be at least trying to be honest about it, as opposed to just planned testing that actually skews, you know, the overall result. And that's just, you know, what's out there within communities. So that's maybe something that you could look at in terms of trying to address that issue. As with your power, and you're saying that, you know, you're greatly reducing your costs because of renewable energy. I hope that continues in terms of your estates management, that you, even if you have to go to other alternatives, that the costs will come down.
Can I encourage the member to ask questions?
I did ask 2 questions.
Yeah, I know,
get
but
2 answers.
Yeah,
I
but
can,
and-
I'm happy to.
well, do
and
you
the
want
other-
answers, or are we just?
No, I want answers to
Well,
those 2.
could
Could I ask the last one,
Yeah.
Chair?
Well, just questions could be sharper.
Okay, I'm new to this, so you'll have to forgive me. Storm and sewage separation, are there any plans in terms of addressing that issue? Because I know a lot of your system is you know,
Yes.
swamped as a result of storm and sewage mix. Is there...
I'll do my best. So, question 1 in relation to integrated constructed wetlands. So that's just a very natural way to treat waste,
Yeah.
and we established one in Stonyford. There is a plan for a second site at Ballykelly. And we've bought the land for that, so we're hoping to get that one installed. And our 6-year plan included within it, so that customer promise about protecting the environment does allow for innovation and sustainable, you know, an ambition for sustainable solutions to wastewater treatment. So again, we would be looking for every opportunity. It's not suitable in every location because you need a very big land mass, but where that opportunity arises, we'll certainly grasp it, and we are seeking innovation. In relation to sampling and water quality, I would have to say that any work that we can do to build trust and to provide reassurance, we are happy to do. We are an entirely very open organisation. We do take all those customer contacts and we feed them into our forward work programme. And I guess this goes back to the importance of funding a capital programme, because we take those customer water quality complaints and we look at them and then we say, where should we be targeting investment? And if that investment's constrained, then that is having a direct impact on customers and the timeliness of rectification certification. We sample, so we would love to have you to come and see our labs and maybe get a little bit more insight into our sampling regime, because we sample every day at people's homes unannounced to test for our water quality, and then that feeds back into what we do on the network. So again, we're entirely open in that regard. And the final was in relation to power. And we've huge ambitions in relation to driving down our carbon footprint, making the best use of our estate for renewable energy, be that solar, be that hydro, and that again forms a key part of this plan that we have set out for ourselves for the next 5 years.
And the separation.
Storm separation, again, funding drainage is a very expensive and takes quite a lot of planning, because you're in the ground, you're having to invest in huge infrastructure. And yes, we have ambitions, and we have within this plan targets to develop storm separation schemes, but 5 years won't see that. And I suppose the biggest area of the Living with Water programme, which is, could be a £750 million programme, has a strong element of storm separation within it. And of course, that's a discussion for another day. That's a programme of work that will be seeking funding over the coming years, and we'll be heavily involved in that.
Thank you.
Mr. Easton?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. In your presentation, there was the bit about the 2.8 billion that you need to spend over the next 6 years. Yeah. And you said something about you're able to spend 1 point something.
7.7.
1.7.
But that leaves a shortfall. And then you go on further in the presentation about 155 million to do your plan to try and cut costs. How are those two figures?
Yeah, maybe just go back to that slide in the presentation. So 2 billion was an estimate of what Northern Ireland might need to invest in this 6-year window, but we probably couldn't deliver all of that. It probably wouldn't be viable to deliver it, and there's an affordability question. We felt 1.7 billion might be more appropriate. But again, it was constrained. So what we finished up with in the plan, and what was endorsed by government and then supported by the regulator, was the smaller sum of the 990 million. So our 6-year plan out to 2021 has an investment programme of 990. That works out in terms of the about 150 million a year. That's that 150. And then I went on to say, approximately, out of that, 80 million of that is to maintain the assets just in their working order today, just to keep them maintained, keep them running, keep them effective, replace pieces that break and so forth. So the rest then is available to build the things like the new schemes, the new wastewater treatment works maybe at Ballycastle, maybe upgrade Dungannon wastewater treatment works, etc., etc. So you have a constrained amount of money to build some of those things that Northern Ireland needs to keep its infrastructure modern and efficient and ready for the 21st century. I hope maybe that gives you some of that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Just quickly to say your sewage treatment plant at Donegal is fantastic.
Yes, you were visiting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Armstrong?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation. Sarah, you just mentioned there quite quickly, you touched on the question I'm going to ask you, and it's about the utilisation of the water flow to actually create sustainable renewable energy. You've talked about the funding conundrum that you guys have, and I'm sure if 40% of your power comes from renewable resources, that there's a huge bill to yourselves. So my question is, if you are already considering hydropower or other sustainable sources, how much can you potentially see a reduction in your power costs coming down?
Well, we're looking at, over this 6-year period, a £3.5 million reduction in power costs. That's what we've targeted ourselves to deliver through this programme of work. And we have set aside some funding to invest in solutions that would promote that outcome.
So on the long-term basis then, I know you're saying there's a shortfall in funding, that this could be a potential way to help to make that shortfall?
In actual fact, you'd need you'd need additional capital funding to generate some of the schemes, to put the capital scheme in that would deliver the improved renewable power footprint. So in a world of constrained funding, you have to decide, is it clean, safe drinking water first, or reduced renewable energy, because they'll compete with each other for the scarce capital funding.
Okay.
And I suppose in a world where there was more funding available, we would look to invest some of that in renewable energy, which drives down the power bill eventually.
Which is the short-term, long-term argument, I suppose. My final question, very quick one. I am a rural dweller, live in a rural constituency, and there's a significant number of rural homes that are not currently connected. They certainly have mains water, but they're not connected to the sewage system. Have you targets in place to achieve more connections that way?
We have not necessarily targets to maintain connections. What we do is we facilitate communities. So if a community grows up and there are a number of properties who therefore feel that there's sufficient number of them to sustain a sewer connection, then they can gather together. We have our connections process facilitates a cost allowance per property, and so then if the cost to get the sewer out to that group, that community, if you like, fits within the reasonable cost allowance, then that's paid for. If it's higher than the reasonable cost allowance, then the community needs to decide, do they want to split those costs to get the sewer out to them. So we don't set targets in relation to connecting people to the sewer, but we have in place a connections policy that facilitates people to come together in communities and have that sewer made available to them.
And that's where there is a community, of course, but in some of the rural areas where there's isolated properties, there wouldn't be the
It's
number.
probably just maybe not economic then. At the if somebody in an isolated area wanted a sewer connection, they could certainly apply to us and we would cost it for them, and then the decision really would sit with them as to whether that's an investment that they would want to make. We will take some of that cost under what's known as a reasonable cost allowance, but if the cost of the connection is in excess of that, it would be for the householder to decide whether that was an investment they wanted to make.
Thank you.
Okay. Just before I bring in Mr. McAleer, can just follow up to that question. You don't set targets, so how do you target? How do you decide where you're going to work next in an area then that isn't connected? If you don't set targets.
So we don't set targets for sewer connections, but we look at population growth, and we look at, we work with the local councils and the council development plans to understand where population will grow, and then what we invest in is our wastewater treatment works to ensure that they have sufficient capacity to take the waste that may be provided to them through growth, be it housing developments, be it factories that are predicted. So we work alongside local council to understand the development plans in areas, and then to make sure that our infrastructure can match that and build our then investment plans around that.
Okay. Mr. McAleer.
Thank you. I'm glad that the renewable energy was raised. The fact that you have a 23,000 acre land mass and a 28 million per annum bill, and you say you've got ambitions for the company and moving forward with this, Sarah, is there any point in the future where we maybe get an update on where you're at with those proposals, or
Absolutely. In relation to power?
Renewables and,
Yes, we could certainly plan that for the future, if, in the forward work programme, if that was helpful.
Yeah. And you see there, Rowan, you were referring earlier, Tom, but this is just for information, the benchmark companies that you've been compared to. Are is this the virtual frontier companies, or is it actual companies?
It's the companies, and then this virtual frontier company. So the regulator in England looks at the most efficient water service provider and the most efficient wastewater service provider, and they're quite often two different organisations, but they'll put them on the matrix and say if you combine those two, that's the most efficient. It's the frontier curve that Northern Ireland Water is benchmarked against. So when we started Northern Ireland Water back in 2007, the efficiency gap was around about 50%. We were 50% less efficient than the frontier. We've closed that gap during the last 9 years to round about, it's sitting around about 12% now. And our plan out to 2021, if we can sustain the investment and continue to have the operating costs we need around that, it is planned to take that down, I think, to maybe close to 5%. So we have ambition to close that plan, because that means the running cost in Northern Ireland is lower, and the bills then to businesses and small businesses that are paying that £67 million, that's lower as well. That's good for the economy here.
Sure. Just, maybe hypothetical, but so the company that you're compared against is a frontier company, a virtual company, which is an amalgamation of the best bits of other companies. Do you have any sense of how NI Water would compare against your counterparts?
Yeah, we do. We compare quite favourably. You see, when we started the business, or when we started the company back in 2007, we didn't even sit within the groups. If you graph them, we sat way out here on our own. We were just lagging. And now, if you graph them, we're sitting now within the group. We're ahead of some of the companies, and we're not as efficient as some of the others. But we're definitely sitting within the group now. And in terms of our tariff, we're probably sitting mid-table, so we're not the highest tariffs by any means at all, and we're not the most efficient. We're probably sitting mid-table. So the plans that we set in each of the business plans since 2007, Northern Ireland Water delivered the outcomes, the service improvements and the efficiencies. And this 6-year plan period that we're in now is critical to continue that, because we want to make sure that when we finish PC 15 in 2021, we can say we were able to deliver the further efficiencies. We're closer now to the pack, or we've improved in the pack. But our services are better as well. Customers are getting a better service. The water service is better. The quality is good still. Supply interruptions are dealt with in a good way. And that's part of the overall planning, is to do just that.
Chair, and just one thing. Your hybrid business model, does that present any challenges?
Very much so. I think that the biggest challenge is to efficiency. So we have a really strong ambition. I think for Northern Ireland, as a publicly owned organisation, we could provide best-in-class service at lowest cost, and that's clearly the ambition. The funding, having agreed a 6-year plan and then find out in years 1 and year 2 you don't have access to the money, so therefore you don't have certainty of the entirety of the plan. That's inefficient. As I plan and my team try to plan the capital work, they don't know what money they're going to get next year, so therefore they can't reasonably decide and to work with contractors to secure best value in setting out those schemes. So that is hindering us in being efficient. Now, what we need is certainty of funding, and that potentially could be provided within the current model. That's what we ask. We have a shareholder, we are publicly owned, we can continue to be publicly owned. The thing that the organisation needs to know is you have a 6-year plan, it will be funded, you will be held to account for it. Please go and deliver it. I guess that's the ask that we would make as a company.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Raymond McCann.
You mentioned there have been savings and efficiencies made over recent years. You're doing more for less. Less presumably encapsulates fewer staff. That's part of it. Can you put a figure on that? I mean, either in percentage terms or sort of in numbers, in absolute numbers. And how do you see? Have you got projection, as you say, there may be further curtailments on public spending, which would possibly predict very likely affect yourselves? Have you any projection as to how that might go forward?
I guess in terms of staff numbers, way back in the dim distant past, water service could have been delivered by well over 2,000. The service that we provide could have been delivered by well over, I've heard figures as high as 2,400 mentioned.
In 1973 it was actually over 3,000 across Northern Ireland whenever it was delivered by the councils.
Today we provide our service for just under 1,300, with just under 1,300, about 1,250 people in our organisation. Our plans for the next 6 years are very much focused on reorganising our business and on focusing on what customers want and streamlining our business. So less so about headcount reduction and more about streamlining our processes and taking out, in some jargon, the cost of poor quality. So the handover between departments, streamlining that process, sending 2 people out, 2 different teams out to a job, empowering and skilling one team to go out to the job and use that to drive the efficiencies. So there isn't a widespread headcount reduction plan within our business plan. There may be some headcount reduction in line with we have an ageing workforce, so our workforce has been recruited over years, and quite a proportion of our workforce is approaching what might naturally be the retirement age. So our workforce plans would take that into account, but we don't have a programme that is where other services might be targeting headcount. We're targeting efficiencies in our processes.
Okay, if there's further curbs in public spending, and next year, and again the year after that, and again the year after that, and of course, prior to him losing his position in this, Mr. Osborne assured us that that's what was going to happen, and that would have a knock-on effect. There will come a point then, won't there, where making efficiencies and streamlining will not be enough. That you'll actually trying to establish that you, like, in my view, sort of all other government services or public services might well soon reach the stage when it's damaging your performance, however efficient you are, but simply on the amount of money you get, it can't be done anymore. And then you might be losing positions, not because people are retiring and so on, but simply of money constraints which affect your performance. Isn't that right?
And I suppose at that stage, if it came to that, the government here would have decided to put health at risk.
Yeah.
You know, as we looked at funding constraints in the past, you were getting to a position where potentially you were signing off on polluting beaches, and I don't think that's a position where I certainly wouldn't endorse or stand over.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why we're making the case that says this is a basic.
Yeah.
You know, we would say this is a basic human right. This is a fundamental of a modern society. We take for granted 24/7 access to clean, safe drinking water. Do we want to move away from that? And that's my challenge.
Oh, yeah, none of us would challenge that at all. I mean, as I say, water comes into a different category than almost any other commodity that we have. So the implication of that is that if you were forced into that position in the dogfight for resources at budget time, I think you'd be entitled to, and you may well agree, sort of
Yes.
backing sort of and looking for it. That's, the other thing, three other brief things I was interested in, you mentioned clean beaches and so forth, and I can see sort of that if it's discharge of sewage and so on, that will come squarely. But you have no other responsibility, do you? I mentioned this because I'm trying to discover who does have. You're obviously not responsible.
We're not
for cleaning
responsible for
plastic
beaches.
bags off beaches.
No. We work, you know, in our corporate social responsibility capacity. We do work with partners like Tidy Northern Ireland, and would involve ourselves in beach clean activity. But that wouldn't be a statutory responsibility of ours.
Yeah.
But we would have an impact because our works will discharge into waterways right across Northern Ireland.
Okay, last thing from me anyway. At what stage as Northern Ireland Water would you become involved, sort of in schemes or reparative schemes or whatever to do with water quality? What I mean is, as I say, I've got the River Faughan in mind. That there was a problem there. There could be a problem there. I know that water testing is happening, sort of, and I've seen the figures, so I'm not questioning that at the moment. But it does strike me that if we reach the stage, and the engineers and others, not only from Northern Water that I speak to, say, yes, it is possible, where leaching from sort of dumps, whether legal or illegal, will begin to pose a threat to water quality. And what I'm asking you is, sort of, at what stage do you become involved? I mean, presumably it'd be too late.
Well,
sort of if you suddenly discovered that there's something wrong with water quality, rather than having had a say into how you plan the dump, how you seal it off. Do you remove stuff or do you seal it off from leaching into the river and so forth? There is considerable concern about this in the Faughan area.
We were abstracting from that river, and I don't think we are abstracting from the River Faughan, Sean. But
I thought you were now. So.
Yeah, I think we are.
We are. So then we would be interested in the raw water quality that comes to our treatment works and the impact that can have on treatment and cost of treatment. And we would take a view on that. The primary, I suppose, responsibility would be with the Environment Agency to make sure that construction of the dump and so on is built in such a way that it wouldn't leach. And if it was having an impact on us, we
At
would.
the planning stage, we would be a consultee at the early planning stage as well.
And all of our water treatment works and catchments have what's known as a drinking water safety plan. So that is our and our long-term view. So we have a drinking water safety plan that looks at all of the risks in a catchment and then says what is our mitigation for those risks, and that's how we get to become involved. And going back to Jenny's question in relation to sampling, we carry out sampling at the inlets of our works the whole way through our process. So were there a water quality issue on the raw water coming in, and we would like to think that our process would pick that up on the way through, and then we would be taking a decision at the outlet as to what to do, and we could have the facility to isolate that water as well. So we have in place what's known as drinking water safety plans, and we do that in conjunction with the Drinking Water Inspectorate to ensure that we are looking at all the risks in our catchments related to where we're getting our drinking water from.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Framacan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. It's certainly interesting, and I think you're right that all of us take water for granted, and if the water is contaminated, then it has a direct impact not only on health but on employment and quite a lot of other things. I think that it should be up there with the other major departments that get funding. But there's a couple of things, and Jenny touched on one of them, and it's about the separation of sewage and water and how thing. And I think recently there has been heavy rainfall that has led to sewage overflows in the streets and things like that. Is there a plan there when that happens for a clean-up?
Yes.
And it was a known one area that there was complaints whilst they may have come out at a stage and cleaned it up, but there was no follow-up to see if it was having any impact on communities that lived there. There was also some concerns that when people had rang through, that they were told that NI Water had a 24-hour report out thing, and people that see raw sewage laying on their streets and all the materials go with it don't want to hear
Yes.
things like that.
So we have our call centre works 24/7 basis. We'd endeavour to outperform. So 24 hours it would be highly unlikely that anyone would ever wait that length of time. Certainly when we get out of sewer flooding contacts, we're straight on it. In terms of a clean-up, yes, you're absolutely right. We do have the facility in place, and we send people out to conduct the clean-up. Now, the clean-up that we do, we have worked with the Water Research Council to ensure we pick up the debris, but some of the other items would be sprayed, and there is a natural of degradation that takes place as well. That sometimes people think, oh, this can't be safe, but actually we've carried out research that tells us it is safe. So we do come out, we do have a clean up. The call centre is there 24/7, and out of sewer flooding is escalated very, very quickly to our guys and our teams on the ground and responded to very promptly.
And we work very closely with the Rivers Agency and Transport NI when there's a flooding incident occurs. If it's any disputed liability, Rivers Agency takes the lead, and we support them. And that was evident during the recent storms earlier in the year, where they took the lead and we were in supporting them.
So I'm raising this because I actually witnessed it myself, that some streets were covered with debris, as you called it, and there was a bit of it, not so much a dispute, but trying to find the information of when it was going to be cleaned, how it was going to be cleaned, and was there any follow-up to see if there was any residue left of what had come out of the sewers. I know that you're talking about spraying and things like that,
Yes.
but if you go to somebody in a house and say to them, don't worry, it's been sprayed and it's going to be clean, and most people keep our kids off the streets.
I know. It's hugely upsetting, and it is not something, again, that's, you really want to invest in your network, that you don't have that. That is one of the things that people in Northern Ireland said they really don't want to see. And I would just, if we haven't written to you already, we will write reminding you of our elected representatives hotline, so that if you're ever in the position where somebody has come to you and you do need that hotline is there for elected representatives, and it gives us the facility to get to your queries quickly in case any of the committee members need that number. So I'll make sure you get that.
Thanks, Sarah. Just two other points. One is that there's been some local businesses and some people who lived, or unfortunately maybe they live at the bottom of the street, find that the water pressure getting into either the business or some of the houses is not what it should be. Is there anything planned to try and deal with that? Because it certainly has an impact on the ability of local businesses to work. And the second question is, again, I don't know why it rests at your door, and that is the heavy vandalism that there is in good weather to local standpipe
Yes,
stations.
I think that rests
and
at all our doors.
And is there anything? Because it amazes me that that kids make just things out of metal that opens the things right away, and before you know it, there's constant flows, and we're constantly told that it has a major impact on the water levels. So, is there anything there that can be done to rectify that? And I know that people need easy access to it, but there has to be something there that allows it to.
So I suppose two things, low pressure, there is a minimum level of pressure that we must deliver to, so if we're below that, we will seek to rectify that, and that goes back to, I think it was Ronan talked about, or perhaps Sean, the number of properties that are experiencing low pressure and removing them off a low pressure register. So that is something that we do. Again, you have to invest, how do you remove properties from low pressure? You invest in bigger water mains, or you invest in pumping. So it requires investment, but yes, we have a minimum standard that we endeavour to ensure that people receive. The vandalism and of water hydrants, I mean, there is a clear safety risk. If there was a fire, when somebody does this, and if the fire brigade had to come out and get access to water, and the pressure was such that there isn't sufficient to enable them to fill up their appliances, that is a clear risk. Should it be solved by putting a different lock on a standpipe? Really, it should be solved by us saying, how do we value water? I met someone from Australia, and when somebody threw a glass of water in the sink, they drank half of it, and they threw the remaining half of the glass of the water in the sink, they visibly went, because water is so valuable there that they wouldn't even think to do it. So there's we have an education role. And we have a big double-decker bus, which you might get to see, that we go out round schools, we visit thousands of children, and water efficiency is one of the things that we preach. So I think the more help that we can get in those communities where that abuse takes place, our own staff, the guys who work for Sean, come under severe pressure when they go out in some areas to try and turn those hydrants off, to the extent that sometimes for their safety we have to find somebody in the community who'll take them in, to help them, to be with them, to ensure that they're not attacked, and that's not acceptable in any shape or fashion.
No. Okay. Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. I do want to put on record thanks, because there was investment into the sewage treatment works in Ballyclare a few years ago, and additional money had to be set aside last year because of issues that we have in relation to 6 Mile River and its proximity to the 6 Mile River, and as a consequence difficulties that was created. But where I want to come is there was 13 hours, I think it was 1,030, my understanding was there was 1,030 sewage treatment works throughout the province, and there was a large investment went in a number of years ago in Ballyclare, and in the process of that they decided to close down Ballynuir sewage treatment works, Strayed, Ballyeaston and Doak, and pumped them all to Ballyclare, which took out the additional capacity that we had in Ballyclare. It's now beyond what it could cope with. Well, it's at a limit now. And I want to know, in relation to additional funding that would be required to increase our capacity, does the GoCro, I'm going to call it that because that's effectively what you are, do they have the possibility of making a business case and doing borrowings on that? And that's something that I just want to.
I'll let Ronan pick that one up with
currently under our various, under how we're set up, and the agreement or the memorandum between us and our shareholder, we're strictly not allowed to borrow money in the open market of the markets. So we have to live within the constrained funding to do that. There were just before Northern Ireland Water went live, there were two large PPP schemes.
Yes.
And again, members may have different views about the PPP schemes, but that was back at the time when PPP schemes were probably being used by maybe the government back then to solve investment issues and that kind of thing. There is private money in that kind of format, but we have no plans currently to introduce further PPP plans. Again, that would be a decision from government and maybe the funder and the Department of Finance. So we can't go to market to raise money in the market. We have to bill for the services to businesses and non-domestics, collect that money, and then we have to receive the subsidy from government, and then we have to borrow from government money to build the capital programme, and then we have to service that in terms of interest back to government, pay that back to government, and that's what we do at the minute. And Northern Ireland Water currently has borrowings of just under 990 million from government on its balance sheet.
Okay, thank you. Your borrowings are direct from Treasury then?
Yeah.
On the basis of where I stand, we're now looking at a town which was identified with a potential growth factor for the Belfast Metropolitan Area Plan, a significant growth. We're already at capacity. There are 2,500 homes to be built. Infrastructure, the cart always seems to be in front of the horse. Yeah. You know, and this is where the problem is. The developers are leading the way, and unfortunately there doesn't appear to be a mechanism, and I'm wondering if this is something that we should be looking at, a mechanism to ensure that there's sufficient funds brought in from future development to actually help fund the infrastructure that is required. Now, developers will bring in a separated system right to the limit of their development.
Yep.
But once it hits the adopted road or the adopted network, it becomes just one system. And you know, this is where the problem is, because you're adding in clean water, and I'm talking about that surface drain water, into the foul treatment system, which is destroying our capacity. I'm wondering, is there a mechanism to ensure that you can continue that separation at least a little bit further towards your...
And the mechanism is here.
Okay.
So the mechanism absolutely exists, and it's back to those 3 bowling balls. So the 2.8 billion was all the money to do all the things, which would include storm separation. The 1.7 million is with the people that we have and the contracts that we had in place. That's what could be reasonably done in 6 years. So the answer, you know, I think we're so firmly on the same square that the answer is making the case at the executive table when decisions are being made to say, how will we spend our capital in Northern Ireland? And that's why we believe, you know, the economy, health and the economy and the environment, our infrastructure needs to be funded so that when the developer builds his 2,500 houses and he comes to us, the wastewater treatment works has the capacity instead of the other way around. And that is how we develop our plans. But if we don't get the plans funded, then we will be behind. So and the more we can get people to understand that that's what we're about, that that's what we're asking for, that we want to be ahead of the curve.
I want to come back to one point, and it's in relation to input into your sewage treatment works, not the outflow, the input into the sewage treatment works, because some fairly major pollutants and poisons can make their way into your sewage treatment works, and as a consequence they don't always get diluted to enough whenever it's coming out the outflow, where we have a major incident. And sometimes people are saying, well, why don't they hold their hands up and say it came from our side? We've yet to see that. I'm waiting on a very big report to come out in relation to a major incident, and you Rona, be well aware of the one I'm talking about, but it's in relation to Ballyclare.
Yes.
And I do think this is a problem. Where do we have the early warning system to ensure that we do not open the valves whenever we know that there's something very serious in the network? Doesn't mean you've introduced it into the network.
Yes, no.
I'm saying it could have come into your network, and I'm saying, how do we ensure that it doesn't make its way back out? Because irrespective of what happens, if something comes onto my land and it runs off my land and it pollutes somebody else's, I still am responsible because it came off my land. Yeah. I then have to take a dig at somebody else. Unfortunately, you have nobody else to dig from because you can't tell where it came from, and that's where the problem is. But the buck stops with the outflow.
And of course, on our works, the Environment Agency are the agency that hold ourselves to account, and if we were aware of something within our works, we often have the capacity to divert that to what's known as a storm tank and hold it and actually not let it out when we are aware of it. I think the difficulty comes from when something happens in a watercourse, the first place, of course, people will look to is the water company, because we're obvious, but often, and I don't have the statistic, but it is high percentage where the runoff into our watercourses is coming from land and not necessarily the treatment works. So we don't hold our hands up because generally we don't believe, if we know we have
Sometimes it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It is a duck. If you know exactly where it came from, yes, that's another point.
and I would say that I know that particular works and the operatives who work in it, and they are very, very diligent.
Very diligent.
We've made sure that they are.
Yes.
You know, I appreciate
And they work with the local anglers, and they have, we've been very open as well and taking people around so that you can see exactly what it is that we do and how our process works.
Just in the final point, and it was in relation to the question I asked earlier, in relation to potential future investment by developers into areas and the mechanism to ensure what has been the contribution in the past into the system for upgrades, because we know there have been moratoriums, and I think Malile was one area that was mentioned at one time. There was no development going to be allowed unless the sewage treatment work was upgraded. Those are points. What investment came from the private sector to actually help that along that way?
The private sector doesn't fund the investment on our infrastructure, so that investment didn't come from the private sector. We would make the case to have those works upgraded, so that would become, a very strong case for us to say we are aware of development, and development is being constrained. We believe this works needs to be upgraded, and it goes back to funding our plan. Our plan isn't made up of nice to-dos. In the main, it's made up of what is needed, a 21st century infrastructure for providing 21st century service.
I'm looking at
Paul,
something.
sorry, and I know that you have probably more questions, but we are already 15 minutes over time, and it seems to me as you could take another 15. I'm sorry to curtail your questioning, but Mr McNulty.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah, Sean and Ron. Very detailed and interesting presentation. You said quality is regulated by the Drinking Water Inspectorate, so I'm sure that the umbrella regulation comes from an EU directive, so I'd be interested to know how you propose to maintain standards given that you are no longer going to be operating under an EU directive. Just touching on a point from earlier, rural dwellings, obviously there's no viability to have a main sewer connection to rural dwellings, and they therefore will have their own septic tank. I'm not sure if this is your function, whether it's the Environment Agency or your specific function, or what sort of cooperation there is between your departments in terms of inspection of those rural dwellings, standalone septic tanks. So at build point, a new build point, and in future down the line, is there a continual inspection rota, or how are any leakages or issues reported that have obviously potential to yes. impact the quality of our water?
So I'll take the second bit first. The installation of a septic tank and its discharge is entirely a matter for the Environment Agency. So the Environment Agency are the agency that regulate discharges to the watercourses. It has absolutely nothing to do with Northern Ireland Water, so we take no part to do with it. The only role that we have is we provide a septic tank emptying service for customers in Northern Ireland, which can be done online or you phone our call centre. In relation to our water quality and our wastewater compliance targets that were set from Europe, those European standards are then enshrined in legislation at a UK level. So that legislation is in place and will remain in place until it is amended or repealed. So for now, the status quo remains, and we will continue to do what we do to provide those very high levels of water, drinking water quality and wastewater compliance.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, all three of you, very much for your answers. No doubt today's engagement is the first of, I would imagine, many. And thank you for your presentation and the answers you gave, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, members, we then move on to M28, Departmental Briefing on Transport. And again, I just want to reiterate, all electronic, for those in the public gallery, all electronic devices should be switched off or switched to Wi-Fi only and airplane mode, and not on 3G or 4G In addition, all the devices should be muted. At page 102, you'll see the departmental briefing, and 111, the departmental first day briefing. So, also on page 135, the raised briefing paper, potential areas of interest for committee or infrastructure. Okay, then welcome Mr. John McGrath, Deputy Secretary of the Department, Ms. Liz Loughran, Director of Road Safety, Vehicle and Regulation, Mr. Kieran Doran, Director of Public Transport Service Division, and Mr. Gary McCarthy, Transport Policy, Strategy and Legislation. Gentlemen, and Jonathan, you're very welcome, and I'll hand over to you to make a presentation, then we'll take questions.
Okay, Chair, good morning. I welcome the opportunity to initially brief the committee on the work of the Transport Resources Group in DFI. Well, there's 6 business areas in the group, where 3 are represented here with me. Liz Loughran to my left, who's in charge of road safety and vehicle regulation. Kieran Doran to my right, in charge of Public Transport Services Division. And Gary McKenna to the far left, who is here in lieu of Tom Reid, who's the Director of Transport Policy and Legislation Division. I will also cover the work of the other 3 areas of work: finance, human resources and corporate services, and strategy, communication and change in my remarks, and respond to any queries you have on those remarks. My group largely focuses on transport and related policy issues, and will also have a lead role in delivering the connectivity outcome in the Programme for Government framework out for consultation at the minute, and specifically the 2 transport indicators set out in that. As I said, we also cover a range of key central functions which are vital to the operation of a large, complex, multidisciplinary department such as DFI. And if you bear with me, Chair, I'd just like to run then over the nature of the business in brief and summary, and then come back and perhaps take questions. As I said, there are 6 divisions within the group. Running through them in the first place, the Public Transport Services Division, which Kieran on my right oversees. A key role there is the oversight and sponsorship of TransLink and the management of the contract with TransLink. The supervision of grants, both to TransLink in terms of capital and resource, and also the operation of the concessionary fare scheme, which is a key executive policy. The group also has responsibility for the community transport scheme and arrangements and grants to the different providers across the province, and I know that will be an issue, I think, which will be of close interest of the committee as we go ahead. It also has a role in terms of the Rosslyn ferry services and the tendering arrangements around that, and has a key role in terms of certain route licensing. And if we want to come back to that, then Kieran would be happy to cover any questions in detail as we go ahead. The Transport Policy, Strategy and Legislation Division, which Gary's up in this morning, covers a whole range of issues around general transport policy, including sustainable transport, transport modelling and planning, which is an increasingly important bit of work, the cycling unit and the advancements we've seen in that in recent years, the work we're doing about integrated passenger transport in conjunction with health and education sectors in particular. It has had a key role to date in EU fundings and programmes where previously DRD and until recently this department saw itself as being a lead beneficiary of EU funding, and obviously that's a problematic area at the minute. We're also responsible for the relationships with the trust ports and gateways in general, including the airports. We're the custodian of the majority of transport legislation in conjunction with Liz. And as a result of the restructuring of the departments, we're now responsible for inland waterways policy and also then the oversight of Waterways Ireland as north-south body. That division also leads in discharging overall executive policy in relation to Rosslyn Island and executive initiatives there. And as I said, also will have a key role in pursuit of the connectivity outcome in the programme for government and the 2 specific transport indicators. Liz's division is responsible for promotion of improved road safety and deliver of better regulation of the transport sector. That includes road safety promotion and outreach, driver policy, vehicle policy, road user behaviours and legislation, freight licensing and regulation, and within all of that, specifically taxi legislation. Including now in the new department, we have now the joining of the Transport Authority functions elsewhere in the department, the road maintenance functions and the road safety, all of which could lead us a better cohesive approach to safety in general. And linked to that, the DVA, for which my colleague Fiona McCandless is responsible, also has a key role in road safety. Finance Division, and you had my colleague John McNeill and Stuart up recently, and I'll just summarise overall responsibility for financial planning and management of the Department's budget, preparation of departmental resource accounts, overall financial systems management improvement, supervision of economic appraisals and business case guidance, then wider issues around procurement policy, fraud policy, asset management, and provide support services to internal divisions such as Transport NI, the Planning Service and the DVA. The Strategy, Communications and Change Director at the Centre provides support to the Minister, the Permanent Secretary and colleagues across the Department. This includes the development of a communications and engagement strategy, the equality agenda, emergency and business continuity planning and coordination, and corporate governance arrangements. Key responsibilities are departmental coordination, private office, strategic planning, emergency planning, communications, and it also had a key role in the institution of DFI from May onwards. And as we go forward, that division will also have a key role in assessing the implications of the referendum decision last week in terms of the Department's functions. The Human Resources and Corporate Services is a vital role in the Department. We have over 3,000 staff, over 80 locations, and a range of different professional disciplines. The main areas it looks at are human resources. It's also responsibility for information management, facilities management, analysis, statistics and research, and the operation of the information systems within the Department. And that, I think, covers the range of functions in the group. Sure, at a high level, I'm quite happy to take any follow-up questions or queries.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. McAleer.
Thank you. See, in relation to the mess with the transport, Kieran, I just was wondering, is there any update in terms of the new ticketing arrangement for the TransLink, or the new ticketing system, or maybe
the new ticketing project? Where that sits?
Yeah, well, basically, TransLink have a project in place to replace their existing ticketing systems by approximately 2018, and then over subsequent 2 or 3 years, they're intending to implement significant enhancements to those ticketing systems. The current position around the project is that TransLink have tendered for it and are in discussions with the relevant tenders, and would hope to appoint a contractor by September. Can't really go into any more detail than that, because obviously it's a commercially sensitive discussion at the moment.
Well, see, in general terms, would you be looking at a system that would be robust enough to deal with other providers or other operators, or cross-border travel?
Yeah, well, those things will be factored into the specifications, but if there's outside parties who want to integrate essentially with TransLink systems, that would require a separate discussion about the costs and so on. But the actual technical ability to have that connection will be built into the specifications.
Just finding a completely separate topic, I was just wondering, looking for an update of where is the implementation of the Department's bicycle strategy at the moment?
Cycling strategy?
I noticed that's one of the subjects that you have.
But Gary, do you want to say a couple?
Well, the cycling strategy, I think, is in development and is currently being rolled out. Recently, there's been significant enhancements to cycling areas within the Greater Belfast area in particular, try to increase the uptake of cycling, and it's been successful in that respect. And there are further plans to develop that further, to link it to greenways development as well, to make the best possible use and to encourage the increase in uptake of cycling. Particular projects also involving looking to increase cycling within schools in particular and areas of that nature, and the importance of making sure that there's access to appropriate infrastructure for the use and that it can be done safely.
It would be I suppose maybe at some stage to get a detailed update in terms of where that's the councils and all the.
I've certainly arranged for that.
Would that be okay, Chair?
Did you?
It would be okay, Chair, to get an update, maybe
Yeah,
a
of
detailed
course.
update of where it's at across the law.
I'll speak to Dr. Cleve and make sure something's an update.
Can I take it, Chair, any request for
all
data
across the
that
north,
the clerk will write us, just
Yes.
gathering them all up?
I know you'll deal with it very swiftly and efficiently, Mr. McGrath. Is that you, Mr. McAleer?
Yes, yeah.
Mrs. Armstrong?
Thank you very much. I'll just declare at this stage, in the last 12 months, I was the director of the Community Transport Association, but I'll not be talking about that today. One of the things that you mentioned that's been ongoing for a while, and I know it was of concern of the previous committee, is the Integrated Transport Strategy. Given the upcoming guidance from CPD on procurement and grants, will there be any impact to the strategy on that, from that guidance, and obviously the changes that are coming forward from Brexit?
Sorry, I didn't quite, the acoustics, Chair, or...
Sorry, I'm just asking if the Integrated Transport Strategy, we've been told, well, I've been told that there's going to be new guidance coming out from CPD about procurement and grants, and will that have any impact on the considerations of the strategy going forward, and again with the rules that we no longer have to follow from Europe as an outcome of Brexit, will that have any implications on the strategy?
Well, on Brexit, there will be implications, but it's too early to tell. And frankly, in some of these areas, because the real issue is not so much where we're coming from, it's where we're going to. There were discussions earlier, if, for example, the United Kingdom remain part of the European Free Trade Association, then some regulations would still apply. So the view that certain things will not apply in the future because of the referendum isn't as black and white as that. It depends what solution we come up with, which will leave us in a very difficult position in the interim to work out where we're going. I'm not sure what the CPD advice was going to be about.
Yeah, see, I think you're referring to guidance that's coming out about the distinctions between grant and contracts. Yeah. I think we are aware of the guidance, and in relation to the community transport support, it is something that we have been conscious about. Previously, the distinction in terms of being specific in terms of a contract as opposed to a general support arrangement, in terms of a grant to community organisations, is something that we have considered previously. I think we'd be reasonably confident that the arrangements we currently have in place would meet the conditions of the CPD guidance. We have considered that, but obviously in the future with the Brexit arrangements and the potential changes around EU regulations, it's something we're going to have to keep a watching brief on.
I think it's safe to say that without the Brexit referendum, there were some difficult issues arising in terms of bus operator licensing, in terms of EU, and this might say something about that. They haven't necessarily all gone away at the minute. As I say, we don't know where we are, but there are some complexities that are going to come up in the community transport field in the next year or two. It's just there's a lot of uncertainty at the minute, even in terms of where we're going to. Liz, will you?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, it's no great secret that between DOE and DRD in the past there were issues around the regulation of certain operators and types of operators, and particularly funding models, and how those funding models might be adapted to allow organisations to continue to deliver services. We were expecting some guidance from DFT on that. We've been expecting it for a number of weeks. We expected to receive it this week. There are obviously issues now around DFT for all of us, in that we're not quite sure what regulations will apply and how. So at the moment, it's all very uncertain.
So I wasn't particularly interested in the community transport side. I was thinking more about us being able to utilise education transport and health transport services, because there's a blockage there with the licensing. I was going to ask another question about the operator licence, but I think you've already dealt with it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ian McCann.
Oh, yeah. It's a question of road safety, and when a specific question, it may well be sort of that it's not something that falls squarely are entirely within your area. I want to ask about the road safety outside schools. I don't know if you've seen an article last week on the detail.
Yes.
Within me of a rather stark and dramatic nature, I thought, and I'm aware of 3 schools in the northwest who have those exact circumstances apply. And I mean, I can honestly say that when you go to see those schools that I've done, are picking up time. And so on, and there's no worry. It's scary. It's really scary because there's a 60-mile-an-hour limit on what's a relatively narrow road there, the Coshquin Road, and one of them in Derry. And it seems so simple that what should be done there, that it should be a 20-mile-an-hour. It seems the slogan 20 is plenty has been put up by community groups around, or speed bumps, and crucially perhaps a parking bay, so that when parents come along to pick up, and it's a semi-rural area, so the parents are going to have to come. It's an absolute nightmare. This is a fairly narrow road, 60 miles an hour. When they pull in, they have to put the inside, the wheels up on the grass verge to be able to park it, and then get their kids out on one side of the sun. And to watch this on a rainy day, believe you me, you would wonder what's happening. Why isn't something done about it? Can I just go for a minute straight there? Because one of the things that's happened here is that under the last Minister for Regional Development, Danny Kennedy, it was agreed he had a plan. The department had a plan. I mean, to deal with a number of these things. And that plan was, in one of the schools I have in mind, he visited. I was there when he visited and said, right, this will have to be remedied. It then fell victim to the elimination of a whole swathe of relatively small projects because of the lack of money. Now, we could have, you don't want to be predicting the worst, because you sort of feel vaguely you might be bringing it on. But it seems to me this is a matter of great urgency, and I'm just wondering sort of whether there are plans to treat it, to deal with it in a speedy way.
Well, I think I didn't say it stuff myself, but I am familiar with issues like that, and I can recall from my previous post in education there was a tragic incident of a family who was walking to school in the North Eastern Board, and it was highlighted, the issue that wasn't dealt with, and a young child was knocked down and killed on narrow country roads. So these things can happen sometimes, so I think we'll be quite happy to take the issue away and have a look. Clearly, as I said earlier, now the department has both the responsibility for the road maintenance and the traffic authority and the road safety. I think it brings some of these things in perhaps sharper relief. So I'm quite happy to ensure we put those issues, bring those issues back to the Minister.
Okay. Would it be all right if I had some of these schools sent to you? The 3 that I have in mind are one of the men who's done a lot of extensive research work with their own.
People are perfectly free to make their representations.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about is there's loads of transport hubs being created at the moment. It's a wonderful word, a hub, because it seems to me that can mean anything from a bike shed to something that comes Spaghetti Junction and King's Cross or something. And it's been used a lot, sort of, about a transport hub. I've been trying to get to the bottom of this for some time in relation to the railway station on the waterside. The favoured word now for what's going to be put in there, it's the 19th century station, the listed building, and very beautiful. And should be used as a trade station. Is there any update, sort of, and what is this hub that we're now told is going to? I tell you, I'm extremely suspicious that after a long campaign to have that used again as a train station, and everybody agreeing, and every party in the town agreeing.
No, I think
says yes, it's all right. It's going to be a hub which will include trains. I'm not. I don't know what that means.
I think we use hub as shorthand as a locus where you will have both bus and train and perhaps active travel. So it's not single function, it's multifunction. Hub maybe is a shorthand expression, so that's where it comes from, in the same way that we use it for the Belfast Transport Hub. Where it sits is where it has it. We, on the previous minutes, indicated the intention to take forward an application for EU funding, ideally base it on the old station. Ideally. And basically we have to secure that, and you have to secure that at a price which offers value for money for the taxpayer. And negotiation, we're continuing on that.
Can you tell us what the difficulty in the negotiations is? As I understand it, and it doesn't put the purchaser in a great position, but nevertheless, as I understand it from the estate agents who represent the current owner, there's only one possible bidder in the field here. It isn't that there's required.
Well, without getting in detail of the commercial thing, the seller is not renowned for their generosity in disposing of assets.
Very, very.
And I think you would be familiar with that. Secondly, I don't think there is any other purpose to which you could put the old station, because it would be landlocked otherwise. So there's a bit of a horse trading going on about what's the value, and that would have to be stood over in terms of the accounting officer and the minister. But that is our objective, and we ourselves, and Translink in particular here on AFTRS, have been working closely on that. We have got the first stage of the application in for European funding, and it is something we want to pursue. The next question we ask is, well, what about the European funding? And until yesterday, I think we might have thought that has disappeared. There are some indications now that for those things that are in the system already, they could proceed.
Yeah.
So it remains our objective to deliver transport hub through European funding, and our primary objective is to have it on the old station site.
Okay.
But there's some hygiene issues, and you will understand we need to protect the taxpayer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I hope that works, because we'd all
But
hate to see
I would
public
hope
agitation.
I would hope that the interest which you've associated and others don't doubt our bona fides in wanting to get this secured.
Okay. One last thing. Who sets sort of the ratio between public transport, spending on public transport, and spending more generally, and who decides sort of on the ratio between spending on roads and spending on all other types?
There's a capital, or restore boats.
Well, both. But what I'm really interested in, is this decided at a departmental level? Is it decided by yourselves? Is it who decides those things?
Primarily, it will be the minister in terms of the money that's made available to him. But it's not as simple. I mean, you need improved roads to deliver a public transport service. Therefore, improvements to the A6 will improve the bus service to Derry. So it's not as black and white as saying should you put it in public transport or should you put it into roads.
Yeah, you don't need roads to improve the rail system.
No, but I'm saying, and those are decisions. The issue was looked at in the audit office report last year with and the ratio between two we didn't entirely agree with. But those are primary decisions, and obviously the work that will be going ahead in terms of the programme for government and the indicators there, which are about improving journey times on the main road and also increasing public travel, public transport and active travel, means that decisions about the balance on those over time would have to be
And that's by the department, by the minister, make the
by the minister and the executive as a whole in terms of capital priorities. And those will be some of the arguments we'll be putting into the next budget process, which will be shortly.
Okay, thank you. Mr McNulty.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I've met with Minister McElveen previously and yourself, Kieran, in relation to the train service to Newry train station. And I repeat again, I've said it before a number of times, there are 46 trains from Portadown to Belfast every day, 10 from Newry. Last train leaves Belfast for Portadown at 11, last train leaves Belfast for Newry at 8. In your presentation you've mentioned transport modelling and planning, strategy, equality and business cases. Now there are 40,000 people who live within a 15-minute radius of 50-minute drive of Newry train station. Mrs Palmer has previously mentioned the logjam from Loch Brickland to Tailback on the road to Belfast every morning because of inadequate public transport provision in my mind. Every train that starts in Portadown in the morning needs to start in Newry. Every train that ends at Portadown needs to end in Newry. For a train station which is 25 miles down the track, why is there not adequate provision for people to move out of their cars into trains and work towards modal shift? And we want to see equality for the people of Newry and Armagh in terms of the massive money that was spent on the train station recently, and now there's not adequate provision in terms of trains coming to that train station or leaving that train station.
Well, as I said, I'll excuse Kieran from this, as he's a key user of the Newry train himself, so he may be conflicted here. I jest only. Obviously, modal shifts is something that we want to pursue, both in terms of, it was on their agenda already, and now with the programme for government targets, it'll bring it up in sharper relief. You know, there are resource issues, there are pressures and things like that. There's sometimes operational difficulties in just being able to do what we want to do. It is something we will want to look at, and we'll take that away. Without passing the book, you may want to tease out some of the detail with Chris Conway, who's coming in after us on the operational issues. A lot of it, some of the issues get tied up with the enterprise as well.
Yeah, I think the other point, just to add to John said, that I think hopefully in the medium term we can move to an RD enterprise service, which will stop in Uri and Portadown, but that should significantly improve the services going through Uri. But as John said, it is partly an issue of funding. You will be aware that there was a specific initiative that TransLink undertook a couple of months ago to try and increase the numbers of people actually using the trains from Uri, and that has been partly successful. But the longer term intention, I think, would be to improve the frequency of the enterprise train, which would benefit specifically Uri as well, and other stops along the way.
One other question, just how concerned are you now about EU funding and programmes given the outcome of last Friday?
At a very basic level, we would be concerned. Previously, the RD and until last week, we would take the view that we were one of the most successful departments within Northern Ireland getting funding, securing. We've worked very hard at it. Got significant amounts of money into the block, which assisted the block in general. The likelihood of Brexit and lack of access to major funds will reduce the scope. That assistance to the block is likely to disappear. We had, at the minute, we had some figures at the minute which that we would have been looking over the mandate and a bit beyond for perhaps up to 400 million to be attracted around schemes. Some of the A5, the York Street interchange, perhaps the transport hub, have some other ones, and well, no complete certainty at the minute. The likelihood is a lot of that money will not materialise at all. And that would have been a big factor in the planning around things like York Street, where we might have looked for up to 40% in due course, which would have come back and assisted the block. So.
John, just on that point, are you finished?
Thank you.
Just on that point and that question, would it be possible for the department, and I think I would kind of share your view, you'll probably know more about it than me, but that if a project or an application is in the process, and it may well, because it's in the process, actually be honoured.
That's the sort of indication we've had at the minute for immediate stuff like.
Would it be possible for you to provide this committee with a piece of work? It doesn't have to be any length, but just in terms of indications of some of the projects you've talked about that may be going forward, because when you get confirmation on that issue that you've just mentioned,
we could with as much certitude
accept that.
As we know. Some of this is emerging by the day, and I don't know. I mean, I would make the point sometimes applications depend on good work, good relationship with Brussels, and a bit of goodwill. So sometimes, if the last bit of goodwill is missing, it may well be the context in which some applications are now being considered. It's a different context than it was before last Thursday.
Yeah. Okay.
But we can do some work on that.
Sure, that'd be good. I appreciate that. Can I just ask, in terms of bus routes, rural routes in particular, where I watched a few weeks ago, there was the farming programme on a Sunday. I can't remember. Sorry? No, the one on BBC One. Anyway,
Country Mile.
Country Mile. That's it. Thank you.
Some show.
Actually, you'll find more urban dwellers will watch that than you think, and unlike me, will remember what it's called. But can I just say that I watched that and with the Yorkshire Dales about a bus route, where the community came together and paid for a bus route. I think in the context of rural bus routes where people are under pressure and bus routes perhaps being lost, and they are a vital lifeline for those communities, what scope, what position does the department and those of you who are facing us now take? For example, if Ulsterbus aren't in a position to provide a service, what position do you take to allow a private operator or a cooperative or whatever it is to look at the opportunity of a similar system being deployed?
I mean, there is a scope for other operators to come in and fill gaps that TransLink can't deal with. And I mean, I think it's safe to say there are major problems in terms of the profitability or lack thereof of Ulsterbus routes.
Yes.
and it may well be that we need to look for different ways of doing things in areas, as opposed to get into either run an unprofitable route or don't run it at all. And it may well be.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, I think there. I mean, it's safe to say we have real issues about the overall financing of Translink because of cuts in recent years. The areas of Translink which are, basically not washing their face are Ulster Bus services, and I think there will be a need to look again at this, and it can't get down to simple either run them unprofitably or don't have them at all, because this is talking about huge areas across. So we may, I think there'll be onus on us all to try and find different ways of doing this. And it may well be you go for a very niche market in local places, and you just then you get back into the community transport area, and the regulatory framework is important. But I think we cannot. I mean, we're on the basis Translink is the only provider, but there will well have to find different ways of doing things.
Yes, a common sense approach is going to be adopted. That's all I wanted to hear, really. That's good. Yeah. In relation to Translink and the linking fares to inflation, the proposal to link fares to inflation, what's your position or view on that?
Well, there has been no increase this year. It was the view of the previous minister. I think a technocratic approach would be to say it's the best way to handle things is to have an annual increase linked to inflation. If you don't have it for a period of years, then you have to pay catch up, and that goes down badly with the consumers. I think it's safe to say, and some of the difficulties, fare increases are important, but they're not sufficient to tackle some of the problems we've got at the minute.
Yeah.
But I think getting back into a regime of regular fare increases is probably a better pattern to be in, rather than taking holidays from them and then playing catch up at some later stage.
Sure. Okay. And Mrs. Palmer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. The Chair just touched on rural transport and the lack of services from rural communities, and I'm thinking specifically now within Lisburn and Castlereagh, where there is no service from on the Hill Hall Road to the likes of the Ulster Hospital from Lisburn. And I know with the rapid transport system from Dunmurry, there will be a fantastic service right through, but that excludes Lisburn and Castlereagh. And are there plans afoot in terms of trying to address that issue for the commuters who would need to get to those hospitals in key areas within that rural area?
I'm not familiar at the minute with whether we've had plans afoot.
I don't think there is specific plans, but I think Translink would be well aware of the need to connect particularly their metro services, which I think would cover that particular area, to rapid transit. And as they'll be the lead operator on rapid transit, there's great opportunity for better connectivity there. So it is something I think would have to be considered going forward.
Okay, and I know that the Moira car park and ride service, I know there was an issue with maybe the purchase of land again, so I think that has been maybe resolved. Will that be on target to be delivered then? And is it 2018 we're expecting?
Yeah, I think so. It's just been given approval within the last month, and that would be one of the priority park and ride schemes from a safety and rail capacity point of view in the next 18 months. So it should be going ahead now.
Good. Can I just ask you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, because I can recall receiving a planned programme for the enterprise that had enhanced services for Lisburn, and all of a sudden it was withdrawn, and then we got the bad news that Lisburn had been taken off the enterprise service within 6 weeks of that. So, I don't know what happened there. I don't know whether it was departmental or whether it was the rail network, but certainly within Lisburn we're very disappointed that trying to grow the service and then to have it completely axed was totally wrong in terms of the links. Can you address that?
I think that arose out of difficulties between Translink and Irish Rail about the service we aim to provide caused some difficulties for Irish Rail in terms of local ones. Translink worked very hard to get a solution. I think that was just the one downside of it. Chris, who's in afterwards, was in the detail of that, and he'd be better placed, I think, to explain the why of it. The mechanics that got to that point. I don't want to duck it, but I think you know, TransLink and Irish Rail came to an agreed position on that. That's right.
Yeah, well, I wasn't party to that specific agreement, but
Could I suggest, we really push for time. I don't like to curtail debate and discussion, but we are pushed for time. If with all due respect, if it's better that the answer comes from the next witnesses, then perhaps we just hold that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Happy enough, Chair.
Is that
That's fine, yeah, thank you.
okay? There are no other members I think have indicated they wish to speak, so thank you all very much indeed for your presence.
Thank you.
Sander. Okay, members, our next briefing then is from Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company, and you'll see the TransLink Get On Board strategy is at page 155, and this is TransLink at page 175. Good morning, Mr. Conway and Mr. Anderson. You're very welcome to committee. I presume you'll make a presentation, and then we'll be happy to take questions from members.
Okay. Morning, Chair. Morning, members. I'm just going to do a short introduction, maybe for 10-15 minutes. And Paddy Anderson's here with me. We'll just do a quick update on our financials as well, in terms of we've laid our accounts for last year at Stormont yesterday. And then I'll open up to questions after that. Okay. Just by way of introduction, TransLink is a public corporation. It's constituted under the Transport Act and adopts the provisions of the Companies Act. TransLink is the brand name for what some people sometimes term the Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company, which actually owns and controls 7 private limited companies which make up TransLink and make up the group. It's a market body with a degree of commercial independence, and it's governed by a board of directors. It operates under a public service contract from the Department for Infrastructure to run the public transport services in Northern Ireland. It's quite unique the way TransLink is set up, in that it's a vertically integrated company, so it manages both the rail and bus operations and also the rail and bus infrastructure. You'll probably be aware in the UK, for example, that those two elements are split, with the bus operations and rail operations being run privately while the infrastructure is provided by the government. I'll just give you some key facts. Key facts in terms of TransLink. We deliver about 1.6 million passengers every week. It's people going to work, education, health services and leisure activities. We've got 12,500 services that we run every day, and we operate a fleet of 1,400 buses and trains. These vehicles in total do 44 million miles per year. As you can see from that, sort of fleet maintenance, refurbishment and fleet replacement is very important for us in terms of doing that number of miles every year. We operate over and maintain 300 miles of rail track, including many bridges, culverts, level crossings, signals that go along with that. And we carry 55,000 school children to school every day. We also employ over 3,800 people in local jobs all across Northern Ireland. And our main bus and train facilities are fully accessible, with over 200,000 concession passes active for travel. And we're the leading transport provider also for major events. So a lot of people enjoyed getting to the fan zones over the last couple of weeks using public transport, tall ships, cruise liners, everything that comes in. TransLink also provides the services for all of that. In terms of a financial summary, not getting directly into our accounts for last year, but just at an overall level, TransLink's annual revenues are around £200 million, of which approximately 90% is derived from fares, and that includes concessionary fares, of which 20% is concessionary fares. The remaining 10% of revenues are from what we call a public service obligation, and that's mainly for rail. As you know, most rail operations aren't profitable, and they're run with a public service obligation. Bus did receive fuel duty rebate until 2013-14, which is consistent with private bus operators across the UK and the Republic of Ireland. However, since the removal of this, bus operations, primarily Ulster Bus, has been making a significant loss. These losses are currently being funded from TransLink's reserves, and TransLink has the reserves to continue to operate this way certainly for 16-17 for the rest of this financial year. However, we are working with the Department to find a sustainable financial model going forward. According to the Northern Ireland Audit Office report, spending on public transport in Northern Ireland is still only 60% of that in England and Wales and 40% of that in Scotland. Now, TransLink has made significant cost reductions over the last year, achieving over £5 million of cost reductions in the last financial year, and our annual plan looking forward has significant further cost reductions built in. This has mostly been in management overheads and back office activities, although there was a service adjustment last year as well. However, we have had some key successes over the last few years. We've had continued fare passenger growth, primarily in rail, Gold Line and Metro, for around a 6% increase over the last 3 years. We've also been increasing parking and ride spaces. We've around 8,000 park and ride spaces now, and we've done a major refurbishment of our enterprise train. We maintain a 100% accessible fleet, meeting all the DDA requirements so that we make sure public transport is accessible to all. And we've grown to 1.2 million visits per month on our website and 80,000 followers on social media. Our strategy looking forward is really consistent with the programme for government. It's to grow public transport and to grow public transport passengers. Our vision is to make TransLink your first choice for travel, and our mission is to deliver transformation in public transport, providing integrated services which connect people, enhance the economy and improve the environment. We plan to deliver this through a focus on key 4 areas. Firstly, operational excellence is what a customer wants, first of all, is a bus and train that are both punctual and reliable, and that's something that's part of a continuous improvement programme that we're working on. Secondly is customer satisfaction at every touch point, be that when people are buying a ticket, dealing with customer service, or just using their services on a day-to-day basis. People want to see good customer satisfaction, and we have a target to improve that above 85% against our customer satisfaction surveys. Thirdly, through investing in our fleet and infrastructure. We have a number of flagship projects, such as the Belfast and Derry to Londonderry transport hubs, as well as the Derry Londonderry rail investment, the Dublin line investments, and continued investment in park and ride, Gold Line and quality bus corridors in Belfast. Fourthly, we want to continue to deliver value for money for our customers. We have a continued focus on cost efficiency within TransLink, and we want to agree a sustainable funding strategy going forward which supports value for money fares and explore options with other key stakeholders to deliver effective public transport services in rural and town services. We launched the strategy during Bus and Train Week. In addition to receiving very positive feedback from key stakeholders, we also received positive feedback from passengers. And during Bus and Train Week, we were able to carry an additional 40,000 passengers over the equivalent week last year, as well as recording increased bus speeds in Belfast and reduced congestion. Ultimately, for TransLink, growing public transport requires a partnership approach, and I am very committed to working with government, with local government and local councils, and with all key stakeholders in the community and the business to support the programme for government outcomes. I think we've just, as I said, led our 15-16 accounts at Stormont yesterday. So I'm just going to turn over to Paddy here just to give us a quick update and a quick review of what those accounts show, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. As Chris said, our annual report and accounts were led in the Northern Ireland Assembly yesterday. Our annual report and accounts for 2015-16 have been certified by our external auditors as representing a true and fair view of the company's affairs. The external auditors have also issued us with an unqualified audit opinion. In terms of the accounts themselves, the accounts show a loss before tax and statutory adjustments, in other words a trading loss of £10.5 million on revenues of £202.9 million, which is roughly £2 million worse than 14-15, but £3.3 million better than budget. This is a planned loss, and it has been funded from the group's cash reserves, which now stand at £39.7 million. This position is set in the context of a reduction of approximately £16 million, or 20%, in the baseline funding that TransLink receives from the Department for Infrastructure since 13-14, and this points to at least a break-even underlying position for the company. As Chris has said, we've reacted to this reduction in funding by implementing a programme of efficiency measures which have resulted in a reduction in cost of some £5 million in 2015-16, and this will act as a platform for further efficiency improvements in 16-17. The loss before tax after statutory adjustments is £18.3 million, and this reflects an adjustment relating to pensions of £7.8 million. Crucially, the public service contract, which was awarded to TransLink in October 2015, and other commitments made by the Department for Infrastructure mean that the company is able to prepare its accounts on a going concern basis. We have a strategy to grow revenues through growth in passenger numbers, which aligns with a programme for government outcomes and indicators, allied to a continued focus on cost efficiency. However, TransLink can only return to break even with a restoration of fuel duty rebate, which was £9.6 million in 2013-14. And as Chris has mentioned, this is the equivalent to the Bus Service Operators Grant, or BSOG, in place in other parts of the UK. And finally, in 2015-16, passenger journeys were 78.7 million, marginally down in 2014-15, reflecting a strong performance in the face of a number of service adjustments. Fare-paying passenger numbers in Metro and Northern Ireland Railways combined were 165,000 up. And this growth in fare-paying passenger journeys was delivered through a combination of effective operational performance, customer satisfaction and the offer of best value products.
Okay, that's our introduction finished.
Thank you very much. Can I ask, you said there were 7 companies within Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company, is that right? Does that provide good economies of scale in terms of management costs?
It's, well, the 7 companies, the main companies that you would recognise would be Ulsterbus, Northern Ireland Railways and Metro.
Yeah.
Within the Northern Ireland Railways, as I mentioned earlier, because of the regulations on how that works, we have to actually split infrastructure and operations out into 2 separate companies, so that creates an extra companies. And there are some other companies which are effectively dormant companies at the minute. They're old companies like Flexibus and things like that, so they don't require any particular maintenance as such. In terms of how we manage our organisation, we manage it as an integrated organisation. They are statutory reporting companies, but we manage it as a completely integrated company. So we have a chief operating officer, finance officer, HR, for example, and we manage it as a completely integrated business. So there's no separate management structures for those companies.
Yeah, but the question was, are there cost implications for those companies?
No.
So Flexibus is why do you retain the name then and the company structure?
Well, with the company structure at the minute has had some companies within that. I mean, we could tidy that up in terms of the structures, but there is some sense in keeping an entity there that's not costing anything to keep it there in case there would be a need to use it in the future.
Something like Flexibus, which I do remember, but is Gold Line then, or Gold Line or whatever it's called, is it another company within?
No, Gold Line sits within Ulsterbus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, in terms of when you talk about a planned loss, the planned loss is the figure what you planned? I mean, you've given us the figure of what it actually is. Right. What was your planned figure?
Our planned figure was a loss, £3.3 million in excess of that. Mm-hmm. Our trading loss, Chair, was £10.5 million, and our budget was about £13.8 million.
Right. What I'm saying is, your planned figure is the figure you've just given us, right?
No, well, the figure that we've just given you is our actual figure for 15-16.
What was your planned figure?
Our planned figure was 13.3 million.
Right. So you're 10 better off?
We're 3 million better off.
Mm-hmm. Right. So in terms of managing this, you're taking it from the reserves?
Yes.
But your reserves will only do that for this year, will it?
Reserves will do that for this year and maybe 2 or 3 months after that, you know, if you do it. But really this year we'll take our reserves down to around 25 million, which is an operating level for us because we, it fluctuates on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. What then, Mr. Conway, would the reserve be used for? I mean, for example, will this have implications for fleet and rolling stock?
Well, the reserves would typically be used for either, a situation like this or for capital spend. So at the minute, TransLink on its own has very little flexibility to spend on capital because we don't know what the situation is going forward. So therefore, our reserves are being utilised for the losses rather than for any investment.
So the reserves could be used to buy buses
Yes, they could
possibly
be.
trains,
They could be.
improvement of stations, build new stations, that sort of thing?
At the minute, what we're doing is we're putting applications into the department for all of that capital spend, because we don't have a situation where we would be confident that we would have the reserves to do that going forward.
Mm-hmm. So, is the loss leader, am I right, the principal loss leader is Ulsterbus, is that right?
Yes, yes it is.
Okay. And what steps are being taken to address that?
Well, the current steps that we have in place are, first of all, growing passenger numbers helps to grow our revenue, so we're continuing to focus on that. We're focusing on all our opportunities within the organisation to grow revenue. We also have a very strong cost efficiency programme in place over the next 2 years, really, in addition to what we've done this year, to carry on forward the years beyond that. However, even when you put all that together, there isn't a sustainable position for Ulsterbus, and that's why we reference the fuel duty rebate as a mechanism that has always been there in bus companies and rail companies across the UK and Republic of Ireland. That for us to operate on a level playing field, that really would need to be restored again.
What progress are you making on it being restored?
Well, at the minute we've had good conversations with the Department for Infrastructure and the Department of Finance, who are sympathetic to where we are, but they've also committed to a public service contract with us as well, and in that there's some commitments about future viability of Translink. So that's all very positive, but until the budgeting exercise that's been done at the minute is completed, we actually don't have a figure beyond this year. We've actually only prepared accounts for one financial year at this point, until we get an outcome from the budget in October.
And I don't really heard the question I asked Mr. McGrath in relation to whether there are non-viable routes that are Ulsterbus routes that potentially might, in the context in which you're talking here, might be threatened. Is there conversation going on how those routes would be protected but not necessarily run by yourselves as an organisation?
Well, I wouldn't say that those routes are threatened at the minute. In fact, we've actually been working.
I said maybe threatened. I don't want to alarm people.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. There's no. I mean, in fact, over the last, as part of our commitment to growing public transport and the efficiencies that we've already generated, we've been using some of that to actually put some routes back in across local areas. And we've actually been doing that since October, where we can fit it within our existing budget, so do our efficiencies and try to continue to do that. So we've been very clear that we haven't been pulling back on services. I think if we look at the integrated transport strategy, what that really is about, for me, is about looking at the service that Translink provides, looking at the service that community transport can provide. And I think the key one with community transport is to really say, what we need to be encouraging people to do is use community transport to the main public transport spine, and then use that in rather than using community transport, door to door. So I think that's something that we need to continue to work with community transport. I think in terms of education, primarily, there is, a budget within education for transport. There's also a budget within health for transport. I think if we can put all of those budgets together, there's maybe an efficiency can be gained by working together, using the benefits and the strengths of each of the operators. I think a private operator to come in and do a rural route would require a public service obligation again, so you're not actually solving anything by doing that. At the minute, what Translink does it actually offsets the profit from its more profitable routes to actually run those routes. But if someone was delivering those routes in isolation, it would be a bigger cost to actually do.
But as it sits at the moment, it's not sustainable?
As it sits at the moment, it's not sustainable, and we're working very closely with the department on a going forward basis to resolve that.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Palmer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Chris, for the presentation. And I suppose it is disappointing to hear that nothing seems to be moving forward in terms of the fuel duty rebate and the loss of that funding. But can I ask you a specific question? And the specific question was around, I had information that was sent to, it was in the public domain, and it was in relation to the enterprise service, and that the programme was to be enhanced, stopping at Lisburn to address the need for business as opposed to just the normal shopping clientele. And it was removed very quickly after that, and then 6 or 7 weeks later, we find that the enterprise had ceased to exist at Lisburn. And I, for the life of me, can't understand how you had programmed it, you had enhanced the service, and all of a sudden it had been withdrawn. And I wondered if you could give us some information on how that happened.
Yeah, so what had happened was that there was a proposal from Irish Rail to adjust the service in line with their DART service, basically some improvements they were going to make to their DART service and an increased frequency on their DART service. And as a result of that, they suggested a new timetable. We had only started discussions with them on it when it sort of went into consultation in the Republic of Ireland, and therefore we started a consultation as well on it. However, the feedback we got through that consultation was very much that it was increasing journey times, and in some of the services it was increasing journey times by quite a lot, 10 or 15 minutes. And the feedback from the consultation was that passengers did not want journey times to increase, and they wanted the service to be, in fact, either maintained or reduced in terms of journey times. So we then went back with Irish Rail and worked very closely on the timetable and trying to integrate the services that they want with the service that we needed. In parallel to that, we actually started a piece of maintenance work on the Dublin line as well, and that's happening between Lisburn and Lurgan. That will take about 2 years to complete. That also adds 3 to 4 minutes into the journey time as well. So when we added all of that together to actually even maintain journey times, we had to work very, very hard with Irish Rail to get pathways into Dublin. And to do that, we had very limited opportunities for the pathways that we could present. We have to present the train at the border certainly at a certain time. And to do that, we had to unfortunately remove the stop at Lisburn. Now, having said that, when we looked at it, there was very few people actually using it at that point. And what we did do then was we put in extra services from Lisburn to Portadown and Lisburn to Belfast. So in a very short window, while there might be an extra 10 minutes to get that service from Lisburn to Portadown and then get on the Enterprise, there is all the services are connected through to Lisburn. We've also looked at enhancing the X1 and X2 bus service as well into Lisburn to give that as an extra opportunity for people from Lisburn who want to travel to Dublin. So we have enhanced the service overall, but the service isn't actually stopping at Lisburn. When we finish the maintenance work, which will be the end of, will be probably early 2018 now, and we will relook at that to see does that extra journey time allow us to stop at Lisburn. I would also say that assuming we go ahead with the Belfast Transport Hub, that we will actually be moving the Enterprise round to start at Great Victoria Street as well, which would save us some extra time as well, and that might be another opportunity to relook at it. Having said all of that, the Enterprise is originally destined to be an express service between Belfast and Dublin, and we've increasingly added more stops into it, and that has slowed the journey time down, which is still one of the big factors that people want us to improve.
And and I welcome the news that you are going to review it in 2018 when the works have been completed and possibly the hub has been, I suppose it's up and running as well. But I would say that the enhancement of the service was because it was identified that there were a lot of people who wanted to commute to Dublin early, and the early morning service was crucial, and it was, the service was offered and then withdrawn. So in saying that, you grow public transport and you grow passengers, it sort of flies in the face of actually what you were planning to do, and then having to put on these other routes in terms of servicing it.
Yeah.
And I know it's a time difficulty for you, but it does seem to me that there was an opportunity lost there to connect with business commuters on the service.
Yeah, if we could just add 2 other points. One is we're still working very closely with Irish Rail to try and get an early morning slot. At the minute, the only slot they could give us meant the journey time was over 2.5 hours, and the feedback we got from customers was that wouldn't be acceptable. So that became the issue. Now, we're still working very hard just to show our intent on enhancing the service. We have actually put on over the summer an enhanced service. So we have a 9 o'clock day tripper train, we're calling it, at 9 o'clock coming back to 6 o'clock for people who want to go to Dublin on holiday, for example, and back again. And that will be reduced fare using a normal train, and it will only be stopping at Portadown and Newry. There won't be stops in the Republic of Ireland. So that's an intent to try and see how that type of service works. But having an early morning service is still what I would like to achieve,
Yeah.
but I have to work with my colleagues in Irish Rail to achieve that.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Chris.
Mrs Armstrong.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay.
I have a few quick questions for you. The public services contract that you were awarded, was that for the 10-year period?
No, that's for 5 years, and then it has an option. It is 2 one-year options over and above that.
And is there any option within that contract for further discussions with the department to happen with regards to the fuel duty rebate?
Is there any, sorry?
Is there any opportunity within that contract then to vary
Not
that?
within the contract itself, other than the contract does say that it's the department's intent to make sure that Translink has a viable financial future. And therefore, we would point to that as a way to address the funding. Now, having said that, we still intend to work very hard on our own cost efficiencies and to increase passenger numbers and generate revenue, which hopefully will minimise that in the medium term. But in the short term, that's still a challenge for us.
Okay. My second, and then just one after this. Just to clarify, does your reserves include depreciation of the stock that you have? Are you allowed to hold depreciation for your stock?
No. Our reserves are effectively profits that we've accumulated in previous years. The depreciation's treated separately within the profit and loss account.
And just thinking about the rolling stock, and when they need to
No,
return.
they are actually net current assets, so I mean it's.
And final one, local transport planning, as we know, was not devolved to local councils. How then, you've talked earlier about the replacement of some rural services coming back into play. How do you ensure that local community considerations, that their voice is heard when you're planning routes?
So, well, when we look at different routes and different options, we work very closely with the councils and, informally, just by meeting the council executives and discussing what the options might be. And we'll also obviously consult with passengers as well. So we have passenger focus groups, for example, and we'll consult with them on what they believe that, would be an improvement to the service. In a more formal basis, we've met with the councils in terms of community development planning and also their local area plans as well. And we would be a statutory body that would be part of those too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mr Easton.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, Alex.
You mentioned that about the railways are never profitable. Why is that in particular, and what are you trying to do to try and address it as best you can?
Well, railways across the world, operate under a public service obligation. It's primarily because of the capital investment required to run a railway network is today is quite significant. And it's not just the laying of track now in terms of safety requirements. You've got signalling requirements and points and all of the technology that has to be run around the network as well. So it is a huge capital investment that a private operator would typically not be able to put up front. You would have to depreciate that over 50 years, for example, to get it to work. Whereas most contracts to private operators are for 5 to 10 years, for example. So what tends to happen is the infrastructure side then is run by the public sector, by government, and it's only the actual what we call railway undertaking, which is running the trains themselves, which private operators take on. With Translink, we have an integrated company, so we integrate the two together and try to offset the two. But primarily, I mean, even the private operators running the rail would work under a public service obligation. A good example might be, if you're running even a 3-car train set, you're talking about 200 people to fill the train. There'd be quite a few journeys where we would have a lot less than that. And therefore, you're running those not on a commercial basis, you're running those because it brings social benefit to people.
Okay. In terms of your reserves, how much have you got left?
Our cash balance at 31st of March 2016 was 39.7 million.
Okay, and you're using that to prop up the losses that you're making at the moment?
Yes, yeah. Okay.
So how much of those are you allowed to use? Did you keep doing that?
Well, we need a minimum amount to run the business. We've got a minimum working capital requirement, so we've always got to retain a portion to run the company.
Between 20 and 25 million is what we would need because of big inflows and outflows in cash on a regular basis. That's a working capital level that we need to do. So it would be unwise to go below that and leave us in a situation where we.
Okay. So you've enough reserves to keep things going for at least
for
a year?
Approximately a year, yeah.
Okay. So in order to address that, there's going to have to be fare rises. Would that be?
Well, I maybe.
Or less, there's savings. You're going to.
Yeah, well, I'd mentioned 3 or 4 things there which we need to address. The first one is we need to continue with the cost efficiency that we're doing. We do need to continue to grow passenger numbers. In fact, growing passenger numbers has a bigger boost to revenues than fare increases on their own. I think to do that, you need to have fare increases which are value for money, which people see as value for money.
Yep.
And that's why, you know, something which fits closer to inflation and is well understood by people is a much more balanced way of doing it. Doing fare increases which are excessive actually at a net level reduces passenger numbers and doesn't actually generate what was originally intended to do.
But there will have to be some.
Well, like any business, you know, as costs go up, you have to adjust prices, and you know that would be something we would continue to review. Having said that, again, you know, we have a lot of value for money, really good value for money tickets that people can avail of. For example, using a smart card, you can get 30% discount, yet only about 30% of our customers actually avail of that. So there are lots of ways that we would still try and encourage people to get good value out of their public transport spending.
So when do you envisage there to be fare rises going to happen?
We've nothing planned at this point in time.
Okay, let you off from there.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Garvin.
It was really, I think Alec touched on part of the point in relation to the reserve. I would just like an indication of what the reserve that you're currently holding, which we've heard is 37 million, is of your total outrunning. Should you have nothing coming in, how long could you function on that?
So you mean if you ran your reserve to zero?
Yes.
Well, you're probably talking about 2 years.
2 years.
But you couldn't. You couldn't apply. You couldn't. It's a theoretical question because you couldn't actually prepare a set of accounts which says you're going to run your reserves to zero.
I'm looking at it from a business perspective.
Yeah.
And even guidance to local government is that they should have 10% of their. They should hold a reserve of 10% of their actual budget. Total budget. So if a council had a budget of 20 million, they should have 2 million in reserve to allow them to run. So my understanding is then, by asking that, you would be well in excess of that.
No. Well, our current revenues are just over 200 million. Yes. So 10% would be in the range of the 20 to 25 million. And I would stress as well, we are an operating company, which has big inflows and outflows, which have to be balanced more so than a non-commercial business would have. We're currently sitting at 39. Our current projected losses would bring us down to the region of 25 million.
How long did it take you to build that surplus up?
It's ups and downs over a number of years.
Yeah.
The other point that I want to just look at is in relation to building up the investment that you use. You don't put any of that towards depreciation as has currently been asked or previously been asked. None of that is to actually make up for replacement of stock because you normally ask for money for replacement.
Yeah, the depreciation comes out of our P&L as we offset any capital payments that we get from the department.
The depreciation is an accounting transaction. There's no depreciation is non-cash.
Yeah.
So it's a way of reflecting the diminution in value of a fixed asset through your profit and loss, but there's no cash impact from depreciation.
The other point, and where I want to come into, and appreciate it comes under the umbrella heading of the Transport Holding Company. What is, and looking at it from being a very suspicious individual, what is the advantage of holding 7 different sets of management and accounts related to 7 different holding companies?
It's purely a statutory thing that it has been over time.
But does it mean it is good business?
Well, it doesn't. Some of those accounts just sit there. We do nothing with them. There's no cost. There's no outlay on those organisations other than at the end of the year we have to prepare an account for them. it's something that I will look at in terms of cleaning up, because there's some of those companies aren't necessarily required going forward, but we don't run them. There's no management and there's no cost in them. There's nothing in them. They're just shells on a statutory account.
Yeah, the reason I bring it forward is because we have the Transport Holding Company and the management of it, and probably it's something that should be looked at more strategic, because up to now you've had railways within their own wee fiefdom. You've had TransLink and the bus service within its own wee area, not necessarily always seeming to be totally joined up.
No, well, they are. I have to say they are.
Can I tell you, there has been definite cases where there has been no reasonable join up in what has actually happened in planning. That's something that I'm saying. Why is there a necessity for two different?
No, we'll
be doing for the same thing.
Well,
they're all public transport.
From a management perspective, we manage one organisation called TransLink, and our organisation is one organisation. Right. All I'm referring to there is statutory accounts. That's all I'm referring to. Hopefully I haven't confused anybody, but it's just statutory accounts. The organisation is one organisation, and there are legal reasons why we have to report it that way. Okay.
I don't think, to be fair, anybody's confused, Mr. Conway, and if we've given the impression that we have, that's misleading. It is simply, I think, the question I asked, and which is similar to Mr. Gervin's question, is that having 7 companies, some of them which are moribund, and continuing to have those companies in statute, I don't think makes any sense unless you're going to reintroduce those companies. That's simply the point I was making.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Mr. McNulty.
Hi, gents. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to say well done on your recent bus and train week.
Thank you.
Huge success. However, in that, and in terms of your objective 3, to grow the numbers of passengers and passengers using public transport, you say you're committed to supporting an increase in modal shift towards sustainable transport. So you're encouraging people to get on the buses, you're encouraging people to get on the trains, but there are no trains for them to get on. So from Newry train station in the mornings, there's no direct train from Newry to Belfast in the mornings. So you have to get on the train at 7:15 to go to Portadown, change in Portadown and get into Belfast sometime around 8:30. What are you doing? Where is the rationale operationally for that decision, that route? Where there are 40,000 people living within a 15-minute drive of Newry train station, yet there is not a direct train, not saying direct, but a train where you don't have to change between Newry and Belfast in the mornings. So we have what we've discussed many times, Jenny, the log jam from Lochbrickland to Belfast in the mornings, people bunged in the cars, travelling from Newry to Armagh because there's no other way getting there.
Well, I can answer it in a couple of ways. So I have 2 or 3 points just to pull out. The first one is that, as we've been pains to stress earlier, we're an integrated transport company. So we do have a very viable express bus service from Newry, which operates early in the morning, will get people into Belfast on time. I would say something in terms of supporting of that. In terms of the congestion coming into Belfast, it's certainly on that type of service, it would help us. And we are working with the department on extending the bus lanes out to Sprucefield, because that would then allow a much faster journey straight from the Sprucefield park and ride all the way into Belfast, and also would help services coming in from Newry and from Dublin as well on that. So that is something we have done because we had limited budget, and that's the best way we could use that budget. In terms of the rail itself, so we have set up a sort of passenger user group in Newry. We met with them actually just in early June. And as we understand it, there's 2 challenges which the people in Newry in terms of using the train service. The first one is quite a lot of the population in Newry actually go to work in the Republic of Ireland, and they're looking for a better service between Newry and Dublin and Dundalk, for example. And what we've agreed is at the next meeting we'll bring Irish Rail to that meeting to have the discussion about how we get that service improved. In terms of the service from Newry to Belfast, whenever the service adjustments were being made last year, there was wide consultation on them, but they were done on a supply and demand basis. So where we had the biggest volume of people, we tried to protect those services. Where there was less, they're the ones we tried to have some further options for. As I said, from a 3-car set carries about 200 people. The average people using the set from Newry to Belfast was between 10 and 20, and that's why that service got got reduced. However, we've said to the user group in Newry, we're quite keen to work with them on it. We're quite keen to find other options. We did enhance the bus service as one of those things that we've done. If we can get this funding challenge that we have now resolved, it is certainly an area that we'd like to review, along with a few other areas that we made adjustments to as well. It wouldn't just be Newry. There were other service areas that we made adjustments to. So, to our mind, we're very open to discussing it with passengers particularly, and all representatives. We're very open to trying to find a solution to it, and that will be part of our plan going forward. But we do have to have the budget to allow us to do it, and given that it would initially be a non-profitable route, we need some support to help us with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Eamon McCann.
Mr. McNulty was saying it would talk about the difficulties of getting from Newry into Belfast by public transport. You ought to live in Derry, you'd understand sort of all about the difficulties of getting to Belfast. The 212 was 40 minutes late this morning. But I would congratulate you on the opening of the Ballerina stop, as you know there was, and people from outside the northwest might not know, and I'm not about to advance sort of a long explanation as to why that little stop is so important and why there was such a campaign for it in Derry. But you had the Queen on the train heading for Derry.
Yes.
Did you get the Ballerina?
Yes, you got the Ballerina.
Got the Ballerina, and I read a thing that she opened the
yes,
which was remarkably strange, actually, because I was at the opening of the Ballerina. It was opened by Michelle McIlveen on the 22nd of March. So you may not know, and you don't answer this if you don't know it. I just wonder why Her Majesty.
Well, Michelle's very important, but the Queen is obviously more.
But she was overshadowing Michelle a bit. I thought, Michelle.
It's a bit like having an official birthday and an old birthday.
It was obviously a soft opening, was it?
Yeah, it was a soft opening.
I suppose it was, but here's my question. It's only a few miles out of Derry. She goes all the way on this steam train. It's a beautiful train, beautiful, wonderful thing, steam trains, apart from pollution. And she doesn't go on to Derry, and it was part of the reason for that. I didn't join in any petition to ask the Queen to come, but there she was, and a lot of people wanted to see her.
Perhaps that's the reason why she didn't go. You didn't.
May well be. Yes, you're snubbing me, perhaps. No, my point is this: that there's speculation, which I have involved myself there, that the reason why she didn't come on the few extra miles into Derry is that when you look at the existing station that the train comes into in Derry, somebody might have looked at it and said, "This is no place for a Queen. In fact, this is no place to deposit any passenger." So it's an egg box, which which is difficulty access. It's just not. It's not acceptable to anybody, and I'm sure it's not accessible to use. And I'm going to come back to the question, and every time there's somebody relevant here, I will come back to it. Why is it that we haven't had more progress? It's almost 2 years since a consultation about where the U-Trains terminus should be in Derry. It yielded 64% for the station. Three other options. The only other three options which were presented got 36 between them, 64% for the station. It is supported by every political party in Derry unanimously on Derry Council. It is supported by all the local newspapers. It's supported by the CBI, the trade union movement, and everybody's absolute unanimity sort of in Derry. And the station is prized. I mean, history is important. Our built heritage is important. And this is a station which is I could speak for an hour about the John Lanyon design station. It's a wonderful building. There's no plan or architectural design officially, that I've seen. Although the Into the West organisation, of which I'm the convener, that's an interest to be declared, actually did get the architectural department at Queen's, the students to come down. They're just wonderful designs. I wouldn't know technically how good they are, but they look brilliant, which we presented to Translink and to the department and to the minister. I'm just wondering, why is it that after all this time, it's difficulty of buying the premises or buying the building from Mr. Doherty, the developer? He's not the easiest man in the world to deal with. I just don't understand why it can't be said, yes, the consultation was overwhelming. Yes, everybody in Derry wants it. Why can't we have a straight... the suspicion arises that what is intended and the reason for the hesitancy and the use of vague words, we'll have a hub, a transport hub there, the suspicion arises that it's intended, or at least the option has been kept open, of not using that station at all and putting another station sort of a mile and a half or whatever it is out near the Peace Bridge in Derry. And my basic question is, will you please get on with it and tell us that you're going to acknowledge and accept sort of the wishes, the overwhelming wishes of the people? You'd have to have a big reason for not doing it. Have you got a big reason?
I would say a couple of things on that. First, in your earlier comment, the Northern Ireland office organised the Queen's visit, so and you would have to put that question to them as to why they decided to go where they went to. And we
really,
you know.
I mean, you as the operator in the steam train goes down there, you have no idea why they decided it was just stop there.
It's all timing. I mean, there are other things. There's this particular length to the day, and they, whenever they said this is the earliest we can get Her Majesty to the station, and we want her away by such and such a time, then the journey dictates that.
Okay, so we take that up with the NIO.
And we use the opportunity to...
It's not for me. I am not a bureaucrat or a mandarin, but I do know from holding civic position, Mr McCann, that the Queen's itinerary is not set by the Queen. You know.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not demanding that the Queen come to Derry. I have to emphasise that before I go home. But if she is coming that close to you, there are those who
on the station. I'll keep it as brief as I can. But everyone is aware of the ultimate desire, and I can only talk about the last 12 months, the last 10 months, rather than anything that went before it. As was mentioned earlier, this is an EU-funded project. And the word actually integrated hub is part of that EU funding, because it has to include active travel and linkages to across the border as well, in terms of bus services that can link in. So that is part of the EU funding application. As well as that, when you put a funding application forward, you have to give options. You can't just say this is what we're going to do. You have to give them options, and you have to state why you've come to the conclusion. So in that application there will be at least 2 options put forward, so that we can state clearly why this is a better option than that option. And that's why there are several options. I have to say as well, there is a commercial discussion as well, and if that commercial discussion didn't conclude successfully, then we would have to have an alternative option. May not be what people would want, but there would have to be that alternative.
Okay, I'll be keeping an eye.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Palmer, you want to come back in again?
Yeah, just on, thanks, Chair, for allowing me. Just on what you were talking about there, Chris, with the Sprucefield link and the negotiations that are ongoing at the moment. And I was looking at the investment strategy for Northern Ireland and ISNI's tracking system. And it's not even on the tracking system. There's absolutely nothing to mention Sprucefield, whether that's the bypass or even your negotiations with...
It's just to extend the bus lane. That's all I was referring to.
Yeah, but
extending the bus lane out to Sprucefield Park and Ride.
Yeah, it's part of the infrastructure, and yet with all it's not there, so it's not even programmed, and that's concerning.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you
for your attendance. And no doubt we will have you on the committee again, and I appreciate your presentation and your candour in answering questions, and perhaps if you could get the railway station in Londonderry sorted out between this and our next meeting, it would be appreciated. Not least by Mr McCann, but particularly by the Queen, because then she'll be able to visit.
Be able to go to it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members. In terms of correspondence, page 177. and table at page 3. Tara, is there anything you want to raise in relation to correspondence?
At page 190, there is a response from the department to do with the pothole claims from motorists. And we're suggesting that we may wish to request from the department to provide details of the cost of the claims. We've got the numbers, but we don't have the cost.
Do we have the regions in it?
Yeah. They couldn't break it down. If you go to page 90, it couldn't be broken down by constituency.
Yeah, okay.
Then at page 192, we have the departmental's response to the Assembly Research and Information Services paper. This was the current issues paper that they did for our first meeting. So what we're suggesting is that the research officer looks at the response and responds to the committee at our strategic planning day, because the research officer will be there. We have correspondence from the Committee for Finance regarding the budget process, timescales, that's at 219. what we're thinking of doing is we'll reflect the timescales in the court work programme so that we can adhere and scrutinise the budget in accordance with the timescales that have been laid down by the Department of Finance. We also have tabled papers, but there's nothing really there. They're all for noting. But we have one letter that we just got hot off the press this morning from the Minister, and it's to do with the Planning General Permitted Development Order. And it was to do with Woodburn, if you remember, and we wrote to ask because he had said in a statement in the Chamber that he was minded to change the legislation. So basically, that's what he's saying in the letter. And he said, my officials are currently finalising the policy and drafting the proposed legislative changes, which will be subject to public consultation. They will brief the committee on the finer detail before the consultation launches. So we'll find out when roughly they're going to come to us and put it in the Fort Worth programme as well.
Yeah, I think that's the question we were asking last week, that they would be kept informed, and the ministers agreed to do that. So is everybody content with that?
Yeah, and I have one other thing. In accordance with guidance at the Central Deputy Clerk Assistance Office, the members agreed that the committee request information from the department in relation to the budget, such as department's baseline position, its pressures, its spending priorities, and any proposed efficiencies and the linkages to PFG. All stat committees are being requested to ask this of their departments. Are members content that we ask this?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. In terms of the forward work programme for the autumn, obviously this is the last meeting we have of this committee, and we are going to adjourn shortly and go up to the private members' dining room for a continuance of our meeting in terms of moving forward. But the next committee meeting will take place. Sorry, before I do that, any members, any other question, any other business? Good.
Could I ask a minute? Just we are at some point today in the correspondence going to discuss places where we all might visit.
That's what we're going to do now when we finish.
Okay, that's thank you.
So in terms of the date and time next meeting will take place on Wednesday, the 14th of September 2015 at 10 a.m. in the Senate Chamber. It's 16, yeah. Yes, we've got Dr. Who's TARDIS. Members, please note that the committee will be holding a strategic planning day on Wednesday, the 7th September at Duncrew Heritage Centre, Northern Ireland Water. I did tell you it was somewhere exotic, and it's North Belfast, which of course is very exotic. And I understand, though, seriously, that is a very useful site to visit, and it will be very informative. So, and I
can you get a train to it, Chair?
Sorry? Not if you're going on the Enterprise, you can't. If you're coming from Lisburn. But can I just bring the meeting to a adjournment and wish the members a very pleasant summer.
Assembly Senate, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate, Programme